2 years after my divorce, the police suddenly showed up and accused me of scamming $90,000. My head was spinning because I could not remember what I had signed. Then a former cop friend stared at the coffee my daughter had just made me and yelled, "Get a blood test now." What happened next terrified me. My name is Bernard Hayes. At 69 years old, I thought I had built a fortress of peace. A 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs of Atlanta fully paid off, a pension from 30 years in logistics management. I am a man who believes in order, in cause and effect, in the idea that if you work hard and keep your nose clean, the world will leave you alone. But peace is fragile when the enemy has a key to your front door. Before I tell you how my own daughter tried to erase my existence, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that respect is earned, not inherited. It was a Tuesday morning. The kind of Tuesday that feels exactly like the one before it. That is how I like my life. Predictable. Solid. The clock on the kitchen wall read 6:14. I was sitting in my favorite leather armchair, the one that has molded to the shape of my back over the last decade. In my hand was a mug of dark roast coffee steaming in the pale morning light. Outside the window, the world was waking up. The cardinals were flitting between the branches of the old oak tree in the front yard. I remember thinking that the grass needed cutting. I remember thinking about whether to make oatmeal or scrambled eggs. It was the silence I loved the most. The silence of a house that belongs entirely to you. No mortgage, no debts, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the birds outside. Then the world ended. There was no knock. There was no doorbell. Just a thunderous crash that shook the floorboards beneath my feet. The front door did not just open, it exploded inward. Wood splintered and flew across the foyer. Heavy boots thundered against the hardwood like a stampede. Police search warrant. Get on the ground now! The voices were screaming, overlapping, creating a wall of noise that my brain could not process. Men in tactical gear swarmed my living room like black wasps. They had rifles raised. Flashlights cut through the dim morning light, blinding me. I did not even have time to put my mug down. It fell from my hand, shattering on the floor. Hot coffee splashed across the Persian rug my late wife Esther had picked out 3 years ago. Before I could even stand up, a gloved hand grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. "Get down! Hands behind your back!" A boot pressed my cheek into the wet wool of the rug. The smell of stale coffee and gun oil filled my nose. Cold steel clamped around my wrists. I tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but the breath was knocked out of me. I am a deacon at my church. I have never even had a speeding ticket in 20 years. Now I was being dragged out of my own home in my flannel pajamas while my neighbors peeked through their blinds. I saw Mrs. Higgins from across the street covering her mouth with her hand. The shame hit me harder than the pavement outside. They shoved me into the back of a squad car. The seat was hard plastic. My shoulder ached where they had wrenched my arm. I sat there watching my house get smaller in the rear window. My front door was hanging off its hinges. My sanctuary had been violated. The ride to the station was a blur of red and blue lights. I kept asking the officer in the front seat what I was charged with, but he just stared straight ahead. "You will find out soon enough," he said. The interrogation room was exactly like you see on TV. Cold, gray, a stainless steel table bolted to the floor, a two-way mirror that hummed with quiet menace. I sat there for an hour shivering in my pajamas before a detective walked in. He was a young man, maybe in his 30s, with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. He tossed a file folder onto the table. It landed with a heavy slap. "Mr. Hayes," the detective said, sitting down. "You have been a busy man for a retiree." I looked at him confused. "I do not understand. Why did you break down my door? I have done nothing wrong." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Small business administration fraud, wire fraud, identity theft. You applied for 3 separate relief loans for a consulting business that does not exist. $90,000 deposited into an account in your name and then withdrawn in cash." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That is impossible," I said. My voice sounded weak even to my own ears. "I do not have a business. I am retired. I live on my pension and Social Security. Check my records." The detective opened the file. He slid 3 pieces of paper across the metal table. They were loan applications. Complicated forms filled out in blue ink. And there at the bottom was my signature. I stared at it. I wanted to say it was a forgery. I wanted to say it was a fake. But I know my own hand. I know the way I loop the bottom of the letter B. I know the sharp cross I make on the letter H. It was my signature. I did not sign this, I whispered. My hand started to shake. I swear to God I did not sign this. The detective leaned back, crossing his arms. We have verified the handwriting, Mr. Hayes. But if that is not enough for you, maybe this will refresh your memory. He turned a laptop computer around so I could see the screen. He pressed play. It was surveillance footage from a bank. The date stamp in the corner was from 3 weeks ago. I watched in horror as a man walked into the frame. He was wearing a gray cardigan. He walked with a slight limp in his left leg, just like I do when it rains. He walked up to the teller window. It was me. I watched myself on that screen. I watched myself hand a slip to the teller. I watched myself accept a thick envelope of cash. I watched myself put it in my jacket pocket and walk out. I sat there in the interrogation room, unable to breathe. I had absolutely no memory of that day. None. I remembered watching football that Sunday. I remembered going to the grocery store on Tuesday. But that Monday in the video was a black hole. It was like watching a ghost wearing my skin. Am I going crazy, I thought. The fear was colder than the handcuffs. Is this how it starts? Do you just lose pieces of yourself until there is nothing left? The detective saw the look on my face. He probably saw guilt, but it was terror. Pure, absolute terror. Hours later, the heavy metal door opened again. I expected a lawyer. Instead, I saw my daughter. Vanessa walked in looking like she had stepped out of a magazine. She was wearing a beige trench coat and carrying a designer bag that probably cost more than my first car. Her hair was perfectly straight, her makeup flawless. Behind her was Gavin, my son-in-law. Gavin is a white guy, tall, with the kind of face that politicians have. Always smiling, but the smile never quite reaches his eyes. He works in real estate, or at least that is what he tells people. He walked in with that confident stride of a man who thinks he owns every room he enters. Daddy Vanessa cried out, rushing over to hug me. "Oh my God, are you okay? We were so worried." She smelled of expensive perfume and rain. For a second, I wanted to melt into the hug. I wanted to be her father again, to let her comfort me. But then I looked at Gavin. He was standing by the door talking to the detective. He lowered his voice, but he pitched it just right so I could hear him. "Officer, we have been concerned about Bernard for a while," Gavin said. He shook his head sadly. "He gets confused. He forgets where he puts things. Last week, he couldn't find his car in the parking lot. We think it might be early onset dementia." The detective nodded sympathetically, looking from Gavin to me. "That explains a lot. If he is not mentally competent, we might be able to work something out regarding the charges. But he cannot live alone anymore." I froze. Dementia. I pushed Vanessa away gently. "I am not senile," I said. My voice was raspy. "I do the crossword puzzle every morning in ink. I manage my own investments." Gavin walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. His hand felt heavy, like a weight dragging me down. He squeezed just a little too hard. "Pop, nobody is saying you are crazy," Gavin said, his voice dripping with fake sweetness. "But the video doesn't lie. You signed the papers, you took the money, and you don't remember any of it. That is not normal, Pop. We are just trying to help you." I looked at the video still paused on the screen. I looked at the signature on the loan papers. The evidence was overwhelming. Maybe they were right. Maybe my mind was breaking down. Maybe I was becoming the one thing I feared most, a burden. "We posted your bail," Vanessa said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "You are coming home with us, Daddy." "Well, not to your house. The police have sealed it as a crime scene for the investigation. You are coming to stay at our place." I felt a trap closing around me, but I could not see the mechanism. I was tired. I was confused. And I was scared of my own mind. Gavin smiled at the detective, then looked back at me. "Don't worry, Pop. We will take care of everything. You won't have to lift a finger. We will handle your finances, your legal issues, everything. You just need to rest." He smiled at me, but his eyes were dead cold. It was the look of a wolf looking at a wounded deer. I stood up, my legs shaky. I walked out of the police station, flanked by my daughter and her husband. I thought I was walking towards safety. I did not know I was walking into a prison much worse than the one I had just left. I did not know that the blank spot in my memory was not a disease. It was a weapon, and the war for my life had just begun. The drive to my daughter's house was silent. It was not the comfortable silence of family, but the suffocating silence of a funeral procession. I sat in the back seat of Gavin's pristine SUV watching the familiar streets of Atlanta roll by. My hands were still shaking slightly from the handcuffs. I tried to clasp them together to stop the tremors, but I could feel the vibration in my bones. I was a man who had managed warehouses with thousands of moving parts. I could tell you exactly where a shipping container was anywhere on the Atlantic Ocean. Now I could not even tell you how I ended up in this leather seat accused of a crime I did not commit. We pulled into their driveway. It was a modern house in a gated community. Lots of glass and steel. Cold. Impersonal. It looked like a dentist's office disguised as a home. Gavin turned off the engine and turned around in his seat. The tinted windows made the world outside look gray. "Pop, we need to have a serious conversation before we go inside," Gavin said. His voice was calm. Dangerously calm. I looked at him. I looked at Vanessa. She was staring out the window, refusing to meet my eyes. She was twisting her wedding ring round and round on her finger. A nervous tic she had since she was a teenager. "What conversation?" I asked. "I want to call my lawyer. I want to call Harrison. He has handled my estate planning for 20 years. He will clear this up." Gavin sighed. It was a long theatrical sigh that signaled he was dealing with a stubborn child. "Harrison is a real estate lawyer, Pop. You are facing federal charges. Wire fraud. Identity theft. These carry mandatory minimum sentences. Do you know what happens to a man your age in federal prison? You won't survive 6 months." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "I am innocent," I said firmly. "I did not sign those papers." "The evidence says otherwise," Gavin interrupted. His voice hardened. "The video says otherwise. The handwriting experts say otherwise. Look, Pop, we talked to the detective. Because of your condition, they are willing to offer a deal. My condition." There it was again. That word. "What deal?" I asked. "If we can prove that you are mentally incompetent, that you are suffering from dementia, then the intent to defraud goes away. You won't go to prison. You will be remanded to the care of a legal guardian." He let the words hang in the air. Legal guardian. "And who would that be?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. "Us," Vanessa whispered. She finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were red and swollen. "We just want to keep you safe, Daddy. Please, just let us help you." I looked at my daughter. My little girl. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike. I remembered paying for her first car. I remembered walking her down the aisle to this man who was now looking at me like I was a broken piece of furniture. "I am not crazy, Vanessa," I said softly. Gavin opened his door. "Let's get you inside. You are tired. We can discuss the paperwork tomorrow." The guest room they gave me was on the first floor. It was sterile. White walls, beige sheets, no pictures. It felt like a holding cell. I lay awake that night listening to the house settle. I tried to replay the last month in my head. Had I forgotten things? Had I lost time? I remembered buying milk. I remembered changing the oil in my truck. My mind felt sharp. It felt like a steel trap. So where did that video come from? The next morning, the nightmare truly began. I woke up early out of habit. I washed my face and reached for my wallet, which I always keep on the nightstand next to my watch. It was gone. I patted the table. I checked the floor. I checked the pockets of my trousers. Nothing. Panic started to rise in my chest. A primal fear. Losing your wallet is like losing your identity. I tore the bedsheets off. I looked under the mattress. "Pop, what is all the racket?" Gavin was standing in the doorway wearing a silk robe. He held a mug of coffee in one hand. "My wallet," I said, breathless. "I put it right here, last night. I remember putting it right here next to the lamp." Gavin took a sip of coffee. He looked at me with that pitying expression again, that look that made me want to scream. "Pop, your wallet is in the refrigerator." I stopped. "What?" "I found it this morning when I went to get the milk. It was on the middle shelf next to the yogurt. You must have put it there when you got water in the middle of the night." "No," I said. "No, that is ridiculous. I did not go to the kitchen last night. Come see for yourself." I followed him to the kitchen. My heart was hammering against my ribs. He opened the stainless steel refrigerator, and there it was. My brown leather wallet sitting on the cold glass shelf next to a carton of Greek yogurt. I stared at it. The leather was cold to the touch. Condensation had formed on the surface. "I did not put this here," I whispered, but my voice lacked conviction, because if I did not put it here, who did? Would Gavin really wake up in the middle of the night, steal my wallet, and put it in the fridge just to scare me? That seemed insane. More insane than me forgetting where I put it. "See, Pop," Gavin said, closing the door. "It is starting to happen more often. Just like the car keys last week. You are losing track." I took the wallet and retreated to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed trembling. I opened the wallet. My driver's license was there. My credit cards were there. Everything was in order, but my mind was not. I started to recite the multiplication tables in my head. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8 is 64. I recited the names of all the U.S. presidents in reverse order. Biden, Trump, Obama, Bush, Clinton. I could do it. I was sharp. I was logical. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew fast. 2 days later, I woke up to screaming, "Daddy." Oh my God, Daddy. I jerked awake. The smell hit me instantly. Rotten eggs, natural gas. It was thick and suffocating. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the kitchen. Vanessa was there coughing, covering her mouth with her robe. The stove was hissing. All 4 burners were turned on full blast, but there was no flame. The kitchen was filled with gas. She reached out and twisted the knobs off. The hissing stopped. "Are you trying to kill us?" she screamed. She was crying hysterically. I stood there barefoot on the cold tile. I didn't... "You were in here 5 minutes ago," Gavin yelled, coming down the stairs. He grabbed Vanessa, pulling her away from the kitchen. "I heard you walking around. I thought you were just getting water." I looked at the stove. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. Had I walked in here? Had I turned the knobs? I had no memory of it. Absolutely none. But the gas was real. The smell was real. The fear in Vanessa's eyes was real. I could have blown up the whole house. Vanessa sobbed, burying her face in Gavin's chest. "He could have killed us all, Gavin. We can't do this. It's too dangerous." Gavin stroked her hair, staring at me over her shoulder. His eyes were hard, unforgiving. "You see this, Pop? You see what is happening. You almost killed your daughter." I backed away until my back hit the wall. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor. I put my head in my hands. Maybe they were right. Maybe the stress of the divorce, the retirement, maybe it had broken something inside me. Maybe there was a monster in my brain taking over when I slept. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I am so sorry." Gavin walked over and knelt down in front of me. He did not touch me. He just looked at me like I was a broken machine that needed to be scrapped. "We can't wait for the court date, Pop. We need to secure the guardianship now. For your safety. For our safety. I have the papers ready." I nodded slowly. I felt defeated. I felt hollow. If I was a danger to my family, I had to be stopped. Let me just call Harrison," I said, weak. "I just want him to look over the papers. Just for peace of mind." Gavin's face didn't change. He stood up and extended a hand to help me up. "Sure, Pop. You call whoever you want." I went back to my room. My hands were shaking so bad I could hardly hold my cell phone. I found Harrison's number in my contacts. I pressed call. There was no ringing, just a sharp beep and a recorded voice. "This call cannot be completed as dialed. Access to this number is restricted by the account holder." I frowned. I tried again. Same message. I tried to call my friend Ike. Restricted. I tried to call the local bakery where I order my Sunday rolls. Restricted. I looked at the signal bars. Full service. I went into the settings. Parental controls were active. My blood ran cold. It wasn't dementia. It was a blockade. I walked to the bedroom door. Gavin was standing there leaning against the door frame. He was picking a piece of lint off his cashmere sweater. "The phone isn't working," I said. My voice was steady now. The logistics manager was coming back online. "I know," Gavin said. "We put you on our family plan this morning to simplify the billing, and we activated the safety features. You know, to prevent you from making calls you might forget or falling for scams. Scammers love targeting seniors with cognitive issues." "Pop," he smiled. It was the smile of a man who held all the keys. "But I need to call my lawyer," I said, stepping forward. "You don't need a lawyer, Bernard. You have family." He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. He did not lock it. He didn't have to. "Vanessa is making breakfast," he said. "Oatmeal and coffee. You should eat. We have a notary coming at noon." He turned and walked away. I stood in the center of that white room holding my useless phone. The smell of gas was gone, replaced by the smell of bacon and fresh coffee. but the air felt heavier than before. I walked to the window. It was locked. A child safety lock had been installed on the frame. I looked out at the manicured lawn. I was a prisoner, and the terrifying part was not that I was losing my mind. The terrifying part was that I was the only one who knew I wasn't. They were gaslighting me. They were erasing Bernard Hayes the man and replacing him with Bernard Hayes the patient. And they were doing it with a smile. I looked at the reflection in the window, an old man in pajamas, gray hair, tired eyes. I looked weak. But deep down in the center of my chest, a small ember of anger began to glow. It was the anger of a man who had worked 40 years on the docks, a man who had survived layoff strikes and storms. I put the phone in my pocket. "Fine," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play games, Gavin. You want to control the narrative." I straightened my back. Let's see who is the better actor. I opened the door and walked toward the smell of coffee. I did not know it then, but that coffee was the weapon they were using to break me, and it would also be the key to their destruction. I walked into the kitchen and saw Vanessa pouring a steaming dark liquid into a mug. "Here, Daddy," she said, wiping her eyes. "I made it just how you like it, with a little extra vanilla to help you relax." I took the cup. The warmth seeped into my cold hands. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. I raised the cup to my lips. Gavin was watching me from the table. He was reading the sports section, but his eyes were fixed on me. He was waiting for me to drink. I took a sip. It was bitter. But under the bitterness and the vanilla, there was something else. A metallic tang. Something wrong. I swallowed it anyway, because for now I had to be the sheep. But the wolf inside me was waking up. The occupation of my home happened with military precision. It was not a move-in. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a family reunion. By the third day, my house no longer felt like mine. It felt like a stage set where I was a prop that needed to be managed, moved, and occasionally dusted off. Gavin did not ask to use my study. He simply annexed it. That room was my sanctuary. It was where I kept 30 years of logistics logs, my collection of vintage naval compasses, and the framed photo of Esther from our honeymoon in Savannah. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper. It was a space of quiet contemplation. I stood in the hallway watching Gavin carry a box of his things inside. He had already cleared my desk. My naval compasses were shoved into a cardboard box on the floor labeled miscellaneous. In their place sat a sleek dual monitor setup and a Newton's cradle that clicked incessantly. "Careful with that box," I said, my voice sounding thin. "Those compasses are antiques." Gavin looked up. He did not stop unpacking. He just flashed that blinding politician smile. "Don't worry, Pop. We are just making space. You don't need all this clutter anymore. A clear space equals a clear mind. That is what the doctor said. Right, we need to reduce your cognitive load." Cognitive load. That was his new favorite phrase. Everything I owned was a cognitive load. My books were a load. My tools in the garage were a load. My memories were a load. He was stripping my life down to the studs, claiming he was doing it to save the structure, but I knew he was just selling off the copper wiring. I wanted to walk in there and throw his computer out the window. I wanted to grab him by his cashmere collar and drag him out of my house, but I couldn't. My legs felt heavy. My thoughts were swimming through molasses. It was the coffee. Every morning began the same way, the ritual of the golden cage. I would wake up feeling groggy but relatively clear-headed. I would wash my face, look in the mirror, and tell myself that today I would fight back. Today I would walk out the front door and go straight to the police station. Today I would find a way to call Ike. Then I would walk into the kitchen. Vanessa would be there. She looked like the perfect daughter. She wore crisp aprons and hummed gospel tunes while she cooked. The smell of bacon and eggs filled the air, masking the underlying scent of betrayal. "Good morning, Daddy," she would say. Her voice was bright, too bright, like a fluorescent light in a hospital. "Sit down. I made your special blend." She would place the mug in front of me. It was always the same mug. A heavy ceramic one with "World's Best Dad" written on the side. A gift from her 10 years ago. Now it felt like a mockery. The coffee was dark, rich, and it had that faint metallic tang hidden under the vanilla syrup. "I don't want coffee today," I said on the fourth morning. "I will just have water." The kitchen went silent. Vanessa stopped whisking the eggs. Gavin lowered his tablet. They looked at each other. A silent communication passed between them, a frequency only predators could hear. "Daddy, you have to drink it," Vanessa said, turning to me. Her smile was gone, replaced by a look of deep concern. It has your supplements in it, the ones for your memory. If you don't take them, you get confused. Remember the gas stove. Remember the wallet in the fridge. I did not put the wallet in the fridge, I said, gripping the table. Gavin stood up. He walked over to the counter and picked up the pill bottle. He shook it. Pop, we are not doing this again, he said. His voice was low, calm, and terrifying. You are sick. We are trying to help you. But if you refuse the medication, if you become difficult, we might have to consider other options. Professional facilities, places with locked doors and orderlies who are not as patient as your daughter. He let the threat hang there. The threat of the asylum, the threat of being stripped of all dignity and thrown into a hole where no one would ever hear me scream. I looked at the mug. I looked at Vanessa. She was pleading with her eyes, but I saw the hardness behind them. She was complicit. She was the one brewing the poison. I picked up the mug. My hand trembled. Fine, I said. I drank. The effects usually started within 20 minutes. First came the tingling in my fingertips, then the heaviness in my eyelids. It was not like being drunk. It was like being detached. My will to resist evaporated. I became suggestible, compliant, a passenger in my own body watching the world through a thick pane of dirty glass. That is when they would go to work. The days blurred together into a gray loop of television shows I didn't watch and meals I didn't taste. But the horror happened in the afternoons. I remember sitting in the living room. The sun was streaming through the sheer curtains, turning the dust motes into dancing gold. I felt peaceful, too peaceful. My head was lolling back against the recliner. Gavin sat on the coffee table in front of me. He was wearing a blue suit. He looked very professional. He was holding a stack of documents. "Pop, can you hear me?" he asked. His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Yes," I mumbled. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. "Good. We just need to take care of some housekeeping," Gavin said. "Just some standard forms for the insurance company, to make sure you are covered. You want to be covered, don't you, Pop?" "Yes," I said. "Covered." "Good." He placed a document on a clipboard and held it in front of me. The text was swimming. I tried to focus. I saw words like transfer and beneficiary and irrevocable, but they floated away before I could catch them. "Just sign here," Gavin said. He pressed a pen into my hand. I looked at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc. My Mont Blanc, the one I had received for 25 years of service at the logistics firm. He had taken it from my desk. "This is mine," I whispered. "Yes, Pop, it is yours. Use your pen. Sign the paper." My hand moved on its own. It was muscle memory. I had signed thousands of manifests and invoices in my life. My hand knew what to do even if my brain was screaming for it to stop. I felt the tip of the pen glide across the paper. The friction felt loud in the quiet room. Scratch, scratch, scratch. "Good," Gavin said softly. "One more. Just one more, and you can go back to sleep." He flipped the page. Another document. This one looked denser. More paragraphs. "What is this?" I asked. "What is this?" I tried to lift my head, but it weighed 1,000 pounds. "It is just a formality, Pop, for the taxes. You don't want the IRS coming after Vanessa, do you? You want to protect Vanessa. Protect Vanessa." Yes, that was my job. I was her father. I signed. There were more papers. I signed them all. Each signature felt like I was giving away a piece of my soul. I saw Gavin's face. He was smiling. But it wasn't a smile of affection. It was the smile of a miner who had just struck a vein of gold. "Excellent, Pop. You did great." He pulled the clipboard away. He capped my pen and put it in his pocket. His pocket. "Now rest. Vanessa is making dinner." I closed my eyes. The darkness took me. I woke up with a start. The room was dark. The television was playing a rerun of a sitcom, but the volume was muted. My mouth tasted like cotton and old pennies. My head was pounding a rhythmic thudding ache behind my eyes. I sat up. The disorientation was intense. I didn't know if it was 8 p.m. or 4 a.m. I looked around. The house was silent. I looked down at my hands. They were resting on my knees. In the blue light of the television screen, something caught my eye. I raised my right hand. I squinted. There on the tip of my right index finger was a smudge. a dark blue smudge. Ink. I rubbed it with my thumb. It didn't come off. It was fresh ink. Fountain pen ink. The memory of the afternoon came rushing back, but it was fragmented, like shards of a broken mirror. Gavin, the clipboard, the words transfer and beneficiary, the feeling of the pen gliding on paper. It wasn't a dream. I brought my hand to my face. I could smell the ink. It was the smell of a contract, the smell of a binding agreement. What did I do? I whispered to the empty room. Oh God, what did I just do? I tried to stand up. My legs were still weak, but the adrenaline was burning through the fog. I had to find out what I had signed. I had to get into the office. I stumbled toward the hallway. The door to the study was closed. I tried the handle. Locked. I rattled it, locked tight. I pressed my ear against the wood. I could hear the faint hum of the computer server inside. Gavin had turned my sanctuary into a vault, and I was on the outside. I went to the kitchen. I needed water. I needed to flush this poison out of my system. I drank 3 glasses of tap water, standing at the sink, gasping for air. Then I saw it. In the trash can. Right on top. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a crumpled piece of paper. Not a document. A practice sheet. It was a piece of notebook paper covered in signatures. My signature. Bernard Hayes. Bernard L. Hayes. B. Hayes. But the handwriting wasn't mine. It was shaky at first, then getting stronger, more confident, more like me. Gavin had been practicing. He had been practicing my signature. But why? If he had me drugged and compliant, why did he need to practice forging my name? Unless I wasn't signing fast enough. Or unless there were documents he couldn't risk showing me even in my drugged state. I looked at the ink on my finger again. Then at the practice sheet. They were not just stealing my money, they were stealing my name. They were building a paper trail so deep and so wide that by the time I dug myself out, I would be buried under a mountain of debt and fraud. I looked up at the ceiling toward the master bedroom where they slept. I could imagine them up there. Gavin probably sleeping soundly, dreaming of boats and vacation homes. Vanessa probably sleeping with the peace of the justified, telling herself she was doing what was necessary. They thought I was broken. They thought I was a senile old man who would drink his special coffee and fade away into the twilight. I crumpled the practice sheet and shoved it deep into the pocket of my pajama pants. "You made a mistake, Gavin," I whispered. "You left the ink." I walked back to my room. I did not go to sleep. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the moon rise. I forced my mind to clear. I forced my body to metabolize the drug. I needed a plan. I needed to stop drinking the coffee. But I couldn't just refuse. If I refused, they would force me. Or worse, they would put me in a home where I couldn't fight back. I had to play the game. I had to be the actor. Tomorrow, I would take the cup. I would smile. I would say thank you, but I would not drink. And I would find out what was behind that locked door, even if I had to tear this house down brick by brick to do it. The golden cage was strong, but every cage has a key, and I was going to find it. The 4th day of my captivity began like the others in a haze of gray static. I was sitting in the armchair in the living room, staring at a television that was turned off. My hands were resting on my knees, and I remember thinking that they looked like they belonged to someone else. They were thin and trembling. I tried to make a fist, but my fingers would not obey. The drug they were feeding me was efficient. It did not just steal my memory, it stole my will. It made the distance between a thought and an action feel like a canyon I could not cross. Gavin was in the kitchen on a conference call. I could hear his voice booming, confident and full of lies. He was selling a house, maybe my house. Maybe he was selling my life piece by piece. Vanessa was upstairs. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, jarring sound that cut through the fog in my brain. We never had visitors. Since I had moved in, the only people who came to the door were delivery drivers bringing packages for Vanessa. I heard Gavin stop talking. I heard his heavy footsteps moving quickly across the hardwood floor toward the foyer. He was moving with urgency. He did not want anyone to see me. He did not want anyone to see the shell of Bernard Hayes. I tried to turn my head. I wanted to see who was there. I heard the front door open. "Can I help you?" Gavin asked. His voice was cold. It was his gatekeeper voice. "I am here to see Bernie." The voice was deep, gravelly, and familiar. It vibrated in my chest. It was a voice from my past, a voice from the days when men looked each other in the eye and shook hands with a grip that meant something. Ike. It was Isaac Iron Thomas, my best friend for 40 years. We played poker every Friday night. We fished on Lake Lanier. He was a retired narcotics detective, a man who had seen the darkest corners of Atlanta and walked out with his soul intact. "I am sorry," Gavin said, stepping into the doorway to block the view. "Bernard is not up for visitors today. He is having a bad episode. He is very confused." "I did not ask if he was confused," the deep voice rumbled. "I said I am here to see him. Now move out of my way, son, before I move you." There was a pause, a moment of tension that made the air in the house feel thin. Gavin was a tall man, but Ike was a mountain. "You did not block a mountain." "Fine," Gavin spat. "But only for 5 minutes. And do not upset him. He is fragile." Heavy boots stepped into the living room. I saw him. Ike was wearing his old leather jacket and a faded baseball cap. He looked out of place in this sterile modern house. He looked like a storm cloud entering a museum. He stopped when he saw me. I saw his eyes widen. I saw the shock ripple across his face. He took in my slumped posture. He took in the way my head hung low on my chest. He took in the trembling of my hands. "Bernie," Ike whispered. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He knelt down in front of me. His knees cracked, but he did not care. He took my cold hand in his massive, warm paws. "Hey there, old-timer," he said softly. "You look like hell." I tried to smile. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to scream that they were poisoning me. I wanted to tell him about the signatures and the gaslighting, but my tongue felt thick and heavy. "Ike," I croaked. "Good to see you." "I am here," Brother Ike said, squeezing my hand. "I tried calling. Your phone is disconnected." "Broken," I whispered. "My phone is broken." I felt Gavin looming over us. He was standing right behind Ike, listening to every word, monitoring the transmission. "We had to change his number," Gavin said smoothly. "He was getting confused, dialing wrong numbers, calling strangers at 3 in the morning. It was for his own protection." Ike did not turn around. He did not even acknowledge Gavin's presence. He kept his eyes locked on mine. He was scanning my face. He was looking at my pupils. He was looking at the sweat on my forehead. He was doing what he had done for 30 years on the force. He was reading the crime scene. Vanessa walked into the room. She was carrying a silver tray. The smell of vanilla and coffee drifted ahead of her. "Uncle Ike," she chirped. "What a surprise. We did not know you were coming." "I was in the neighborhood," Ike said. He finally released my hand and sat back on his heels. "Well, since you are here, you can have coffee with Daddy," Vanessa said, smiling. She set the tray down on the coffee table. There were 2 mugs, one for me, one for Ike. "I made Daddy's special blend," she said, picking up the mug with the world's best dad slogan. "Here you go, Daddy. Drink up while it is hot." She held the mug out to me. Her hand was steady. Her smile was fixed. I looked at the dark liquid. I knew what was in it. I knew that if I drank it, the little clarity I had would vanish. I would slide back into the darkness. "I don't want it," I mumbled. "Come on, Daddy," Vanessa coaxed, pushing the mug into my hand. "You need your energy. You know how grumpy you get without your coffee." She forced my fingers around the handle. I held it. It was heavy. Ike watched this interaction. He watched Vanessa's insistence. He watched the way Gavin shifted his weight nervously. He watched the steam rising from the cup. "What kind of blend is that?" Ike asked casually. "Smells sweet." "Just a hazelnut roast," Vanessa said quickly. "Daddy loves it." Ike leaned forward. He sniffed the air. He frowned. It was a micro-expression, one that would have been invisible to anyone else. But I knew Ike. I knew that frown. It meant he smelled a rat. "You look thirsty," Bernie Ike said, "but you are shaking like a leaf. Let me help you with that." Ike reached out. I thought he was going to steady my hand. Instead, his thick arm bumped against my wrist. It was a hard, calculated shove. The mug flew out of my hand. It hit the hardwood floor with a wet crunch. The ceramic shattered. Dark, hot coffee exploded everywhere. It splashed onto the expensive white rug. It splashed onto the legs of the coffee table. It splashed onto Ike's boots. "Oh my God," Vanessa screamed. She jumped back, dropping the tray. "Look what you did," Gavin yelled, stepping forward, his face turning red. "That is a Persian rug. That is dry clean only." Ike did not apologize. He did not look embarrassed. He looked focused. "My clumsiness," Ike said calmly. "I am getting old too, I guess. Sorry about the rug." He pulled a large white handkerchief from his back pocket. He bent down. "Let me clean that up," Ike said. "No, leave it," Vanessa shrieked. Her voice was too high, too panicked. "Just leave it. I will get the maid. Don't touch it." She was terrified. Why was she terrified of a spill? Ike ignored her. He wiped the floor. He soaked up the dark liquid with his white handkerchief. He was thorough. He wiped up a puddle near the table leg. But he did not throw the handkerchief in the trash. I watched him. In one smooth motion, he balled up the soaked coffee-stained cloth and shoved it deep into his jacket pocket. He stood up. Gavin saw it too. I saw the realization hit Gavin's eyes. He knew. He knew that Ike had just collected a sample. "I think you should leave," Gavin said. His voice was trembling with rage. "You are upsetting Bernard. You are making a mess. Get out. Now." Ike looked at Gavin. He stood to his full height. He towered over my son-in-law. "I am leaving," Ike said. He turned back to me. He put his hand on my shoulder again. He leaned in close. He smelled of tobacco and rain and safety. "I'm going to fix this, Bernie," he said. He pulled me into a hug. It was a bear hug, the kind that cracks ribs. But in that embrace, he brought his mouth right next to my ear. He whispered 3 words. 3 words that cut through the drug, through the fog, through the fear. "Do not drink." He pulled back. He winked at me. A slow, deliberate wink. "I will see you soon, old-timer," Ike said. He turned and walked toward the door. He did not look back at Gavin or Vanessa. He walked with the heavy, confident stride of a man who has a mission. Gavin slammed the door behind him. He locked the deadbolt. He turned around his chest, heaving. "That man is never allowed in this house again," Gavin hissed. Vanessa was on her knees, scrubbing the floor with paper towels. She was crying. "He ruined the rug," she sobbed. "He ruined everything." "No, he didn't," Gavin said, staring at the door. "He is just a washed-up old cop. He doesn't know anything." But Gavin was wrong. Ike knew everything. And now I knew too. I sat in my chair. My heart was pounding. The fog was still there, but a light had been turned on in the distance. "Do not drink." I looked at the shattered remains of the mug on the floor. I looked at the dark stain on the rug. They were poisoning me. The realization was not a shock anymore. It was a confirmation. It was a weapon. Ike had the sample. He was going to the lab. He was going to find out what was in that coffee. And I had a job to do. I had to survive until he came back. Vanessa stood up, holding the wet paper towels. She looked at me. Her eyes were cold. "I will make you another cup, Daddy," she said. "No," I said. My voice was stronger this time. "I am tired. I want a nap." "You need your coffee," she insisted, stepping toward the kitchen. I threw up. I lied. I felt the nausea rise and I used it. I threw up this morning. My stomach is sick. No coffee. She stopped. She looked at Gavin. "Let him sleep," Gavin said. He sounded distracted. He was pacing by the window, looking out at the street, checking to see if Ike was really gone. "One day without the meds won't hurt. We can double the dose tomorrow." Double the dose. I closed my eyes and pretended to drift off. But under my eyelids, I was awake. I was calculating. Ike was out there. He was moving. The gears of justice were starting to turn. I just had to hold on. I just had to keep my mouth shut and my mind open. I waited until I heard them leave the room. I waited until I heard Gavin go back to his office and Vanessa go upstairs to change her clothes. Then I opened my eyes. I looked at the spot on the floor where the coffee had spilled. It was still wet. I knew what I had to do next. I had to get out. I couldn't wait for Ike to come back with a warrant. That could take days. And if they doubled the dose tomorrow, I might not wake up. I had to escape. Tonight. I looked at the window. The child's safety lock was still there. But Ike had given me something else besides hope. When he hugged me, when he squeezed me tight, I felt something hard press against my side, something he had slipped into the pocket of my cardigan. I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around a small, cold metal object. It was a window punch, a small tool used by first responders to break car glass. I squeezed it tight. "Thank you, brother," I whispered. Tonight the golden cage was going to break. Tonight Bernard Hayes was going back into the world. and God help anyone who tried to stop me. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:14 in the morning. The numbers glowed a menacing red in the darkness of my prison. I had not slept. I sat on the edge of the bed fully dressed in dark jogging pants and a black sweater I had dug out from the bottom of my suitcase. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. It was the rhythm of a man about to gamble everything he had left. Gavin had turned the house into a fortress. Earlier that evening, while I pretended to doze in front of the television, I watched him install the new security system. Motion sensors in the hallway, cameras covering the front and back doors. He had even put a chime on my bedroom door so that if I opened it, a pleasant ding-dong would sound in their master bedroom upstairs. He told me it was for my safety. He said that people with dementia often wandered off at night and got lost. He was building a cage and telling me it was a crib. But Gavin made a mistake. He was arrogant. He assumed I was a feeble old man whose mind was mush. He did not know that for 30 years I managed logistics for the busiest shipping hub in Atlanta. I knew how to find a breach in security. I knew that every system had a blind spot. The blind spot was the renovation. Gavin and Vanessa were having the siding replaced on the west side of the house. Scaffolding had been erected 2 days ago, climbing up the side of the building past the second-floor guest bathroom. That bathroom window was the only one in the house that did not have a sensor yet, because the contractors had removed the frame to work on the siding. I just had to get there. The problem was the hallway sensor. I could not walk out of my door without triggering the alarm. I looked at the window in my room. It was locked with the child safety device. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold steel of the window punch Ike had given me. I could break the glass, but the noise would wake the dead. I had to be smarter. I went to the air vent near the floor. It was an old house and the ductwork was large. I unscrewed the cover using the edge of a dime I found in my pocket. It took 10 minutes of agonizingly slow turns. When the screw finally came loose, I pulled the grate away. I could not fit in the vent, but I could use it. I took a heavy book from the shelf and placed it inside the duct, then shoved it as far as I could with a coat hanger. The thud echoed softly through the metal. Upstairs, I heard a noise, footsteps, then the sound of the heating system groaning. The sensor in the hall blinked yellow. It was confused by the vibration in the floor. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. I opened my door. The chime did not sound. The vibration from the ductwork had interfered with the magnetic contact just for a second, or maybe God was just looking out for me. I slipped into the hallway. It was a tunnel of shadows. I moved like a ghost. I did not walk on the balls of my feet like they show in movies. I walked on the outer edges of my soles, rolling my weight to silence the creaky floorboards. I knew every groan of this house. I knew which board to skip and which one to trust. I reached the stairs. I crawled up on my hands and knees to stay below the range of the motion detector mounted on the landing. My arthritic knees screamed in protest. Sweat stung my eyes. I felt ridiculous. I was 69 years old, crawling through my daughter's house like a thief, but I kept going. I reached the second floor. The door to the guest bathroom was ajar. I slipped inside and closed it softly. I locked it. I went to the window. It was covered with a plastic sheet taped to the frame. I used my pocket knife to slice through the tape. The cool night air hit my face. It smelled of wet pine and freedom. I looked down. The scaffolding was right there, a metal skeleton clinging to the house. But it was a 2-foot gap from the window ledge to the metal platform, and it was a 20-foot drop to the concrete driveway below. I took a deep breath. I swung my leg over the sill. My muscles were stiff. The drug residue in my system made my balance swim. I gripped the window frame until my knuckles turned white. "You can do this, Bernard," I whispered. "You have to do this." I lunged. My foot found the metal grating of the scaffold. It rattled loud in the silence. I froze, pressing my body against the cold steel bars, waiting for a light to flip on, waiting for Gavin to shout. Silence. The house slept on. I began the descent. It was a nightmare. The scaffolding was wet with dew. My hands slipped on the cold metal. Every movement sent a jolt of pain through my shoulders. I was not a young man anymore. I was heavy and tired. But I thought about the signature I had seen. I thought about the smirk on Gavin's face. Anger is a powerful fuel. It burns cleaner than gasoline. When my feet touched the grass, I almost collapsed. My legs were jelly, but I did not stop. I ran. I ran through the shadows of the hedges, keeping low, avoiding the streetlights. I ran past the manicured lawns of my neighbors, past the mailboxes that looked like silent sentinels. At the corner of Elm and Maple, a dark sedan was idling. The headlights were off. I opened the passenger door and fell inside. The interior smelled of old leather and peppermint. "Go!" I gasped. "Just go." Ike did not ask questions. He put the car in gear and we rolled away into the night. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the center console near a terrifyingly large revolver. "You okay, Bernie?" he asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. "I am alive," I said, trying to catch my breath. "Where are we going?" "To see a friend," Ike said. "A man who owes me a favor. He used to be a medical examiner before he got tired of the politics. He runs a private lab now. Very private." We drove for 20 minutes to an industrial park on the edge of town. Ike pulled up to a nondescript brick building. A light was on in the back. Inside, it smelled of antiseptic and ozone. A man in a white lab coat was waiting. He didn't introduce himself. He just pointed to a chair. "Arm," he said. He drew 3 vials of blood. He took a clipping of hair from the nape of my neck. He took a urine sample. "Wait here," the man said. Ike handed me a bottle of water. "Drink," he said. "Flush that poison out." We sat in silence for an hour. The only sound was the hum of the centrifuge and the ticking of a clock on the wall. I looked at my hands. They were covered in rust from the scaffolding. I felt dirty. I felt violated. The man came back with a printout. He looked grim. "You are lucky to be walking," he said. "What is it?" I asked. He pointed to the first line on the chart. "Scopolamine, high concentration. It is a deliriant. It makes you docile, compliant, and causes anterograde amnesia. You can't form new memories. You do whatever you are told." I nodded. That explained the signatures. That explained the feeling of floating. "But that is not the worst part," the man said. He pointed to the second line. "Arsenic." The room went cold. "Arsenic," I repeated. "Chronic low-dose exposure," the man explained. "It accumulates in the system. It causes confusion, muscle weakness, nerve damage, and eventually heart failure. It mimics the symptoms of natural aging or dementia perfectly. If you had died a week from now, a coroner would have looked at your age and your medical history and signed the death certificate as natural causes." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "They are not just stealing from me," I whispered. "They are killing me." Ike slammed his fist onto the metal table. The sound was like a gunshot. "That is it," Ike growled. He stood up, his face dark with rage. "We are going to the police. Right now. We have the blood work. We have the testimony. I will kick Gavin's door down myself and drag him out by his hair." I sat there staring at the paper. I saw the chemical formula of my own murder. I saw the calculated cruelty of my own daughter. She poured the coffee. She added the vanilla to hide the bitter taste of the arsenic. She kissed my cheek while she handed me death in a mug. "No," I said. Ike looked at me like I was crazy. "No. What do you mean, no, Bernie? They are trying to murder you. If we go to the police now," I said, my voice steadying, "Gavin will have an explanation. He will say I took the pills myself. He will say I am suicidal. He has the power of attorney. He has the doctor's report saying I am incompetent. A good lawyer will get this thrown out or dragged on for years. And Vanessa, she will play the victim. She will say she didn't know." "So what do we do?" Ike demanded. "We can't let you go back there." "I am going back," I said. Ike stared at me. "You are out of your mind. If you go back, you are dead." "No," I said. "Because now I know I won't drink the coffee. I will pour it in the plant. I will hide the pills." But why, Ike asked. "Why risk it?" "Because I need them to finish the job," I said. "I need them to think they have won. I need Gavin to sell the house. I need him to transfer the money. I need absolute, undeniable proof that this was a conspiracy to commit fraud and murder. I don't want them to get a plea deal. I want them to go to prison for the rest of their lives." I stood up. My legs were still shaking, but not from fear anymore. From resolve. "Take me back, Ike. Before the sun comes up." The ride back was silent. The weight of the truth filled the car. My daughter wanted me dead. The child I held in my arms, the woman. I walked down the aisle. She decided that my life was worth less than a few mortgage payments and a country club membership. Ike stopped the car a block away from the house. "Here," he said, handing me a small black device. It was a digital voice recorder. "Tape it under the bed," Ike said. "Tape it under the dining table. Get them on tape admitting it. And take this." He handed me a burner phone. "Hide it well," Ike said. "If you miss a check-in at noon every day, I am coming in with the SWAT team." "Understood. Understood." I walked back to the house. The sky was turning gray in the east. The birds were starting to sing. It seemed cruel that the world could be so beautiful when my life was so ugly. I climbed the scaffolding. It was harder going up. My muscles burned. I slipped twice, scraping my shin against the metal, but I pulled myself up. I climbed through the window. I taped the plastic sheet back over the frame. I locked the door. I crept down the stairs, avoiding the creaky steps. I slipped back into my room. I put the vent cover back on. I hid the recorder inside the lining of my suitcase. I hid the phone inside a pair of rolled-up socks. I got into bed. The sheets were cold. 10 minutes later, I heard the alarm on the phone upstairs go off. I heard Gavin's footsteps. I closed my eyes. I slowed my breathing. The door opened. Gavin peeked in. He checked to see if his prisoner was still there. I lay still, letting out a soft snore. He closed the door. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. "Good morning, Gavin," I thought. "Today is the first day of your funeral." I lay there waiting for the sound of Vanessa in the kitchen, waiting for the smell of coffee. I was entering the lion's den, but this time I was not a lamb. I was the hunter, and I would not rest until the trap was sprung. The game had changed, and they had no idea who they were playing against. The sound of water running in the master bathroom upstairs was the only clock I needed. It was 6:15 in the morning. Gavin took exactly 12 minutes to shower. He was a creature of vanity, and those 12 minutes were my only window of opportunity. I stood in the hallway, listening to the pipes rattle. The house was waking up, but the beast was momentarily distracted. I had returned from my night run with Ike just 20 minutes ago. My legs were burning from the climb back up the scaffolding, and my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. But I could not rest. The blood test results were burning a hole in my mind. Arsenic. Scopolamine. They were poisoning me. But why? That was the question that haunted me. Greed is a powerful motivator, but murder is a desperate act. The $90,000 from the SBA loan was a lot of money, but it was not murder money. Not for a man like Gavin, who drove a Porsche and wore Italian suits. There had to be something else, something bigger. I looked at the door to my study. Gavin had annexed it, claiming it as his command center. Usually he kept it locked, but this morning in his arrogance he had left the door ajar. Why would he lock it? He thought I was asleep in my room, drooling on my pillow, a senile old man waiting for his morning dose of poison. I pushed the door open. The hinges were well oiled. I had oiled them myself 3 years ago. It was one of the few things in this house that still remembered my touch. The room smelled wrong. It used to smell of my pipe tobacco and old paper. Now it smelled of ozone and Gavin's expensive cologne. My mahogany desk was cluttered with his gadgets. 3 monitors were set up in a semicircle, glowing with a soft blue light. I sat in his chair. It felt alien. I touched the mouse and the screens woke up. Password required. I stared at the blinking cursor. This was the wall. I knew logistics. I knew how to route a shipping container from Shanghai to Savannah, but I was not a hacker. I looked around the desk for a sticky note, a notebook, anything. Nothing. Gavin was too careful for that. I tried to think like him. What would a narcissist use as a password? I typed in his own name. Gavin Miller 1. Access denied. I typed in money. Access denied. I typed in success. Access denied. The screen shook, rejecting my attempts. I had limited time. The water upstairs was still running, but for how long? 5 minutes left, maybe 4. I looked at a framed photograph on the desk. It was the only personal item Gavin kept there. It was a picture of Vanessa. Not a picture of them together. Just Vanessa looking beautiful and expensive. He didn't love her. He owned her. She was his trophy. I thought about the date he met her. No, I didn't know that. I thought about their wedding anniversary. I typed it in. June 12th. Access denied. Panic began to rise. My hands were sweating. Then I remembered something he said at dinner a few months ago. He said Vanessa was his lucky charm, his golden ticket. I typed in her birthday. The day my life changed forever. The day I held her in my arms and promised to protect her. 04151992. The circle spun. Once. Twice. Welcome, Gavin. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He was lazy. He used the one date he knew I would never forget, but he assumed I was too broken to use it. I opened his email. I opened his browser history. I started digging. What I found was not just a smoking gun. It was a nuclear bomb. The $90,000 from the SBA loan was gone. It had evaporated weeks ago. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. I opened a folder labeled Investments. It was a graveyard of money. Gavin was a gambler. But he didn't play poker like Ike and me. He played with cryptocurrency. He played with high-risk volatile stocks. I saw transfers of $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 to platforms I had never heard of, all of them showing massive losses in red ink. I opened a spreadsheet named Liabilities. The number at the bottom of the column made me gasp. $350,000. He owed money to everyone. Credit cards, personal loans, and some names that didn't look like banks. Names like Viper and The Ledger. These were loan sharks, the kind of people who didn't send late notices, they sent men with baseball bats. I realized then why he needed me out of the way. He wasn't just trying to steal a little cash. He was drowning. He was in a hole so deep he couldn't see the sky, and I was the only thing standing between him and survival. I minimized the spreadsheet and saw a PDF file on the desktop. It was titled Hayes Property Liquidation. Liquidation. That is what you do to a failed business, not a family home. I opened it. It was a complete dossier on my house. Appraisals, inspection reports, and a pre-approved application for a reverse mortgage followed by an immediate sale contract to a private equity firm. The sale price was $420,000. It was perfect math. He sells my house. He pays off his $350,000 debt. He keeps the rest for a new car and a vacation. And me. What happens to Bernard Hayes? I scrolled down. I found a brochure for a facility called Shady Acres State Care. It wasn't the luxury home they promised. It was a warehouse for the indigent, a place where people went to die on Medicaid. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the mouse. They were going to sell everything I worked for, everything I built to pay for his gambling addiction. And Vanessa. Did she know? I found an email chain between Gavin and Vanessa. Subject: We need more time. Vanessa wrote, Daddy is getting suspicious. He asked about the wallet again. I feel sick, Gavin. Gavin replied. Stick to the plan. The doctor said the decline needs to look natural. If we rush it, the insurance investigation will flag it. Just keep up with the coffee. We are almost there. She knew. She knew about the debts. She knew about the house. She might not know about the arsenic specifically, but she knew she was drugging her own father to save her husband's neck. My heart shattered. It didn't break. It turned into dust. Suddenly, the sound of water upstairs stopped. Silence rushed back into the house, filling the room with dread. I heard heavy footsteps on the floor above me. He was moving fast. He wasn't drying off. He was coming downstairs. I looked at the screen. I needed to leave it exactly as I found it. I closed the windows. I cleared the recent documents list. The footsteps hit the stairs. Thud, thud, thud. I pushed the chair back. I wiped the mouse with my sleeve to remove my fingerprints. I moved to the door. Too late. He was in the hallway. I could hear him humming, a cheerful, mindless tune, the sound of a man who thinks he has won. If I walked out now, he would see me. If he saw me in his office fully dressed and alert, the game would be over. He would know the drugs weren't working. He might get violent. I had seen the desperation in his financial records. A desperate man is capable of anything. I stepped back into the room. There was no other exit. The window was painted shut. I looked around frantically. The desk, too open. The curtains, too sheer. The closet. It was a small closet where I used to keep my winter coats. Now Gavin used it to store his golf clubs and boxes of files. I opened the door and squeezed inside. It was tight. I had to step over a bag of clubs. I pulled the door shut just as the handle of the office door turned. I held my breath. I pressed my hand over my mouth. I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Gavin walked in. I could hear the rustle of his silk robe. I could smell the steam and soap radiating from him. He sat down in the chair. The leather creaked. I watched through the thin slit of the louvered closet door. I could see the back of his head. I could see him reach for his phone. He dialed a number. He put it on speaker. "Yeah, it's me," Gavin said. His voice was different now. No charm, just fear masked as bravado. "Where is my money?" Gavin, a voice on the phone crackled. It sounded like grinding metal. "You said Friday. It is Tuesday." I know, Gavin said quickly. "I have it under control. The asset is secured." I don't care about assets, the voice said. I care about cash. You are playing games with the wrong people. Listen to me, Gavin snapped. The old man is fading fast. The doctor says his capacity is gone. I have the power of attorney ready to go. I felt a cold sweat running down my back. I was the asset. I was the inventory he was trying to move. When the voice asked, "Next week," Gavin said, "he is going to have a major episode soon. We are increasing the dosage. Once he is committed to the state facility, I can liquidate the property immediately. The buyer is lined up. Cash deal, next week." I had 7 days, less. If they were increasing the dosage, I might not survive the weekend. "Make it happen, Gavin," the voice said. "Or we will come to the house, and we won't be coming for coffee." The line went dead. Gavin slammed the phone down on the desk. "Damn it," he hissed. He sat there for a moment, breathing heavily. Then he stood up. He walked toward the closet. My heart stopped. My lungs turned to stone. He was coming right for me. He needed a file. Or his golf clubs. I squeezed my eyes shut. I prepared to fight. I gripped the window punch in my pocket. If he opened that door, I would have to take him down. I was old, but I was fighting for my life. He stopped just inches from the door. I could hear his breathing. Then he turned around. He grabbed a stress ball from the shelf next to the closet. He squeezed it once, twice, then threw it against the wall. "Just die already, old man," he muttered. "Just die and save us all the trouble." He walked out of the room. I waited until I heard him go into the kitchen. I waited until I heard him talking to Vanessa. Then I slipped out of the closet. I was shaking uncontrollably. Not from fear anymore, but from a cold, hard realization. I was not a father to them. I was not a human being. I was a check waiting to be cashed. I crept back to my room. I took off my street clothes and put on my pajamas. I got into bed, but I did not sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, and I made a vow. Gavin wanted a major episode. He wanted a show. Fine. I would give him a show. But it wouldn't be the one he wrote. I would play the part of the dying man. I would let him think he had won. I would let him sign the papers. I would let him call the buyers. And when he was standing on the precipice of victory, thinking he was the king of the world, I would push him off. The real motive was not just money. It was survival. And only one of us was walking out of this house with a life. The fern in the corner of the dining room was dying. Its leaves were turning a sickly yellow and curling at the edges. That was my fault. For the past 2 days, that plant had been drinking my morning dose of arsenic and scopolamine. I felt a pang of guilt every time I poured the dark liquid into the soil, but it was a necessary casualty in a war that had no rules. Day 7 of my captivity was the day I decided to win an Oscar. If Gavin wanted a senile, helpless old man, I was going to give him the performance of a lifetime. I was going to be so pathetic, so broken, that he would stop seeing me as a threat and start seeing me as a piece of luggage. The morning ritual began as always. Vanessa placed the mug in front of me. Her hand lingered on my shoulder for a second. Was it guilt? Or was she just checking to see if my muscles were atrophying? "Drink up, Daddy," she said softly. I stared at the cup. I let my jaw go slack. I let my eyes unfocus until the room became a blur. I reached for the handle and deliberately fumbled it. My fingers knocked against the ceramic, making a loud clinking sound. Gavin looked up from his tablet. He watched with the clinical interest of a scientist observing a lab rat. I lifted the cup with both hands, shaking them violently. The coffee sloshed over the rim, burning my knuckles. I did not flinch. I let it burn. Pain was good. Pain kept me sharp. I brought the cup to my lips but kept them tight. I let the liquid dribble down my chin, staining my pajama shirt. I made a gurgling sound like a child learning to drink. "Look at him," Gavin said with a sneer. "He is regressing fast. It is disgusting." Vanessa grabbed a napkin and wiped my chin. Her touch was rough. She was losing patience. "Daddy, focus," she snapped. "Swallow it." I waited for her to turn away to the sink. In that split second, I tipped the mug, pouring the rest of the contents into the fern pot next to my chair. When she turned back, the cup was empty, and I was smiling a vacant, drooling smile. "Good," Vanessa said, seeing the empty cup. "Good job, Daddy." "The drug takes about an hour to kick in," Gavin said, checking his watch. "By noon, he should be completely out of it. That is when we will record the video for the insurance company." I sat there nodding my head like a bobblehead doll. Inside, I was screaming. But outside, I was the picture of decay. The real test came an hour later. I knew that to truly lower their guard, I had to humiliate myself. I had to do something that a proud man like Bernard Hayes would never do unless his mind was completely gone. I was sitting on the sofa. Gavin was on a call with his loan shark begging for a few more days. I stood up slowly. I looked at Gavin. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Where is my mother?" Gavin rolled his eyes. He covered the phone microphone. "I am Gavin, your son-in-law. Sit down, old man." I took a step toward him. "I want to go home," I wailed. "I want my mother." Then I did it. I relaxed the muscles in my bladder. I let go. The warm wetness spread down my legs, soaking my trousers and pooling on the expensive hardwood floor. It was the most shameful moment of my life. I felt hot tears prick my eyes, and I didn't have to fake them. To reduce myself to this, to strip away my own dignity, was a price I never thought I would have to pay. Gavin froze. He looked at the puddle. He looked at me, his face twisted into a mask of pure revulsion. "Oh my God!" he shouted into the phone. "I have to call you back." He hung up and stood up, backing away from me as if I were radioactive. "Vanessa!" he screamed. "Get down here! Now!" Vanessa came running down the stairs. When she saw me standing there, crying in a puddle of my own urine, she put her hand over her mouth. "He is incontinent now," Gavin yelled, waving his arms. "Look at this. This is what I have to deal with. He is a vegetable, Vanessa. A leaking, rotting vegetable." I stood there shaking, sobbing, crying out for people who were long dead. I saw the look in their eyes. It wasn't just disgust. It was dismissal. In that moment, I ceased to be a person to them. I was no longer Bernard Hayes, the father, the logistics manager, the man who built a life. I was just a problem to be solved, a mess to be cleaned up, and that was exactly what I wanted. "Get him in the shower," Gavin barked. "I will call the cleaning crew. I can't touch him. I might vomit." Vanessa grabbed my arm. She dragged me toward the bathroom. She didn't speak to me. She didn't try to comfort me. She just handled me, roughly stripping off my wet clothes like she was peeling a potato. While I stood under the hot water, scrubbing the shame off my skin, I made a plan. They thought I was broken. They thought I was incapable of complex thought. That meant they would be careless. That afternoon, they left me in my room to rest. They assumed I was exhausted from the episode. Gavin went out to meet with the buyer to finalize the cash deal. Vanessa was in the kitchen aggressively chopping vegetables, taking her frustration out on the carrots. I retrieved the listening device from the lining of my suitcase. It was a small black disc, no bigger than a quarter. Ike had given it to me with a warning. "You only get one shot with this, Bernie. Place it where they talk." I knew where they talked. I knew where all the conspiracies were hatched, the master bedroom. I waited until I heard the blender start in the kitchen. It was a loud industrial machine that would mask the sound of my footsteps. I opened my door. No chime. I had disabled it with a magnet I stole from the refrigerator earlier. I crept up the stairs. My knees ached, but I moved with the silence of a shadow. I reached the master bedroom door. It was closed but not latched. I pushed it open. The room smelled of lavender and greed. The bed was made with military precision. This was where my daughter slept, next to the man who was trying to kill me. I dropped to my knees. I slid under the king-sized bed. It was dusty. I crawled to the center, right under where their heads would be. I peeled the backing off the adhesive strip on the device. I pressed it firmly against the wooden slat of the bed frame. I held it there for 10 seconds, counting down. 10. 9. 8. Done. Now I had to get out. I scrambled backward. My elbow hit a shoebox. It made a soft thud. I froze. The blender downstairs stopped. The silence in the house was sudden and terrifying. I lay on the floor, pressing my face into the carpet. Had she heard it? Daddy Vanessa's voice drifted up the stairs. "Daddy, are you awake?" I held my breath. I did not move. I did not blink. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, slow, hesitant. She was coming up. If she found me here in her bedroom fully dressed and alert, the game was over. She would know, and she would call Gavin. And this time they wouldn't use poison. They would use a pillow. I looked around the room. There was no place to hide. The closet was too far. The bathroom was en suite, but if I went in there, I would be trapped. The footsteps reached the landing. I scrambled to the door. I did not go out. I hid behind it, pressing myself into the narrow gap between the open door and the wall. Vanessa walked into the room. I saw her through the crack in the hinge. She looked tired. She was holding a laundry basket. She walked to the bed. She placed the basket on the mattress right above where I had planted the bug. She stood there for a moment, looking at the wedding photo on the nightstand. She sighed. It was a deep, shuddering sound. "Daddy," she whispered to the empty room, "why won't you just let go?" She turned and walked into the bathroom. I didn't wait. As soon as the bathroom door clicked shut, I slipped out from behind the bedroom door. I flew down the stairs. I was back in my room and under the covers in 15 seconds. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would burst through my chest, but I had done it. The trap was set. That night I lay in bed wearing a single earbud connected to the receiver Ike had given me. The signal was clear. I heard them come into the room. I heard the rustle of clothes. I heard the bed springs creak as they lay down. "So is it done?" Gavin asked. His voice was muffled by a pillow, but I could hear every word. "Yes," Vanessa said. "I gave him a double dose with dinner. He was practically comatose when I put him to bed. He didn't even know his own name." "Good," Gavin said. "I met with the investors. They have the cash ready, 400 grand. We signed the papers on Friday, then we put him in Shady Acres on Monday." Vanessa was silent for a long time. I could hear her breathing. It was shallow. "Gavin," she said finally. Her voice was small, like a little girl's. "Is Shady Acres... is it nice?" The brochure looked okay, but I read some reviews online. They said patients get bed sores. They said the staff is abusive. Gavin snorted. "It is a state facility, Vanessa. It is not the Ritz, but it keeps him alive, and more importantly, it keeps us alive." "But he is my father," Vanessa said. "I feel sick, Gavin. I look at him and I see him shaking and wetting himself, and I feel like a monster. Maybe we should just sell the house and let him live with us. We can pay off the debts slowly." I held my breath. This was it. This was the moment of truth. My daughter was fighting for her soul. I prayed. I prayed that she would choose me. I prayed that the love I had poured into her for 30 years would be enough to break Gavin's spell. Gavin shifted in bed. I heard the cold authority in his voice. "Listen to me, Vanessa. There is no slowly. If I don't pay Viper by Friday, they are not going to send a collection letter. They are going to break my legs. And then they are going to come for you. Do you understand?" He paused, letting the fear sink in. "We are underwater, Vanessa. We are drowning. Your father is an anchor. We cut the rope or we both sink. Those are the options." "But he loves me," Vanessa sobbed softly. "He doesn't even know who you are anymore." Gavin lied. "His brain is mush. He is gone, Vanessa. The man you knew is dead. We are just dealing with the body. He is not dead," I screamed in my head. "I am right here, listening to you bury me." Now Gavin continued, his voice softening into that manipulative sweetness. "You have a choice. You can keep crying about an old man who has lived his life. Or you can think about our future. Think about the villa in Florida I promised you. Think about the boat. Think about never having to work again." He leaned closer to her. I could hear the friction of the sheets. "So tell me, Vanessa, do you want to be homeless on the street with a senile old man? Or do you want to live in a mansion in Florida sipping cocktails by the pool? Choose. Right now." The silence that followed was heavy. It was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I waited for her to defend me. I waited for her to say, "No, I choose my father. I choose decency." 1 second, 2 seconds, 10 seconds. The silence stretched on, and with every passing second, a piece of my heart died. "Florida," Vanessa whispered. "I choose Florida." The words were barely audible, but they hit me like a sledgehammer. "Good girl," Gavin said. "Now go to sleep. We have a big day tomorrow." I took the earbud out. I laid it on the nightstand next to the picture of Esther. I didn't cry. I was past crying. The grief had burned itself out, leaving only a cold, hard landscape of ash. My daughter was gone. She had made her choice. She had sold her father for a swimming pool and a lie. I stared at the ceiling in the darkness. "Okay, Vanessa," I whispered. "You chose Florida." I reached under my pillow and touched the cold metal of the window punch. "But you are going to get prison." The performance was over. The actor had left the stage. Now it was time for the director to take control. And the final act was going to be a tragedy they never saw coming. The burner phone vibrated against my thigh like a second heartbeat. It was hidden inside the waistband of my pajama pants, wrapped in a soft handkerchief to muffle the sound. I was sitting on the toilet, the only place in the house where I had true privacy thanks to the noisy exhaust fan I had installed 10 years ago. I pulled the phone out. A text message from Ike. Package delivered. Blue recycling bin. Bottom. I flushed the toilet purely for sound cover and washed my hands. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were clear. For the first time in a week, I wasn't fighting the fog of scopolamine. I was fighting the adrenaline of a man about to walk a tightrope without a net. I walked out of the bathroom. I needed to get outside. I needed to get to that recycling bin before the truck came, or before Gavin checked it. I shuffled into the kitchen. Gavin was sitting at the island eating a bagel. He didn't look up. He was typing furiously on his laptop, probably trying to hold off his creditors for one more day. "I need air," I mumbled. "I want to go outside." Gavin stopped typing. He looked at me with that familiar mix of irritation and pity. "Pop, stay inside. It is hot out there. You will get dehydrated." "I want to check the recycling," I said. "I think I threw away my newspaper." Gavin sighed. He slammed his laptop shut. "You didn't throw away a newspaper, Pop, because we don't get a newspaper. You are imagining things again. I want to check," I insisted, raising my voice just enough to sound stubborn and confused. "I want my paper." "Fine," Gavin snapped. "Go check the garbage. If it keeps you quiet for 5 minutes, just go. But don't wander off. The alarm is set." I shuffled to the back door. I opened it and stepped out into the humid Atlanta morning. The heat hit me like a physical weight. I walked to the curb where the blue bin sat. I looked back at the house. Gavin was watching me through the kitchen window. I could see his silhouette. I had to sell it. I opened the lid of the bin. I started rummaging through the cardboard and plastic bottles. I tossed things around, making a mess. I muttered to myself loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Where is it? Where is my paper?" I dug to the bottom. My fingers brushed against a thick manila envelope taped to the inside wall of the bin. I ripped it free. I had seconds. I couldn't just shove it in my pocket. Gavin would see the bulge. I grabbed an empty cereal box from the bin. I flattened the manila envelope and slid it inside the cereal box. Then I grabbed the box and turned around. I found it. I yelled, waving the cereal box at the window. I found my reading material. I walked back inside, clutching the box like a prize. Gavin shook his head as I walked past him. "You are reading a cereal box now," he sneered. "Great. At least you aren't wetting the floor." I went straight to my room and closed the door. I waited 10 minutes just to be safe. Then I tore open the cereal box and pulled out the envelope. Inside were 2 legal documents. I put on my reading glasses. These were the weapons Harrison had forged for me. The first document was a power of attorney. It looked exactly like the standard Georgia state form. Same font, same spacing, same legal jargon at the top. But Harrison had added a clause. Clause 14B. I read it, and a cold smile touched my lips. Clause 14B. Assumption of liability. By exercising any power granted under this instrument, the agent herein referred to as Gavin Miller agrees to assume full personal liability for all existing debts, liens, and encumbrances associated with the principal's assets. Furthermore, the agent acknowledges that any prior financial transactions conducted on behalf of the principal were done at the agent's sole direction and benefit. It was a mouthful. But in plain English, it meant that if Gavin signed this and tried to sell my house, he was legally confessing that he owed all the money and that he had been the one stealing from me all along. It transferred the debt from my estate to his personal name. It was a trap, a beautiful, deadly trap. The second document was a duplicate of the first, but without the trap clause. This was the decoy. This was the one I would use for practice. That evening, Gavin came into my room. He was holding a folder. He looked almost giddy. "Good news, Pop," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "I talked to the SBA. They are willing to drop the fraud charges if we can prove you are under proper care." He opened the folder and smoothed out a document on his lap. "This is a power of attorney," he said. "It just says that Vanessa and I can talk to the government for you. We can handle the lawyers. We can pay the fines. We can save you from prison." I looked at the paper. It was identical to the one I had hidden under my mattress. Identical in every way except for the missing clause 14B. "I just have to sign this?" I asked, making my voice tremble. "Yes, Pop," Gavin said, handing me a pen. "Just sign right here at the bottom. We have a notary coming tomorrow morning at 9. You sign in front of her and this whole nightmare goes away." I held the pen. I let my hand shake. I hovered over the signature line. "Not now," Gavin said, gently taking the pen away. "Not tonight. The notary has to see you do it. Get some rest. We want you sharp for tomorrow." He stood up and walked to the door. He turned back one last time. "You are doing the right thing, Pop. We are going to take care of you." He left, taking his document with him. I waited until the house was silent. Then the real work began. I locked my door. I pulled the shades down tight. I turned on the small bedside lamp. I took the trap document out from under the mattress. I placed it inside a magazine on my nightstand. I needed a prop. I needed something to create chaos. I went to the bathroom and filled a glass with water. I sat at the small desk in the corner. I placed the decoy document, the one I had taken from the cereal box earlier, on the table. This was the rehearsal. The plan was simple, but the execution had to be flawless. Gavin would put his document on the table. I would have the trap document hidden in my lap or nearby. I would create a spill. In the confusion, I would swap them. I practiced the move. I held the glass of water. I pretended to reach for the pen. I knocked the glass over. "Oops," I whispered. I grabbed a towel. I wiped the table. I used the towel to cover the paper. I slid the paper off the table and into my lap while sliding the trap paper from my lap onto the table. It was clumsy. I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor. If I did that tomorrow, I was dead. Gavin would see it. He would check the paper. I did it again. Knock, spill, wipe, switch. Too slow. My hands were shaking, not because I was faking it, but because I was terrified. I was a logistics man, not a magician. I dealt with forklifts and shipping containers, not sleight of hand. I closed my eyes. I pictured the movement. I broke it down into steps. Step 1, the spill. It had to be big enough to startle him, but not big enough to ruin the ink. Step 2, the panic. I had to act distressed. I'm sorry. Step 3, the towel. Gavin would look for something to clean it up. That split second when he turned his head or grabbed napkins, that was my window. I did it again. Knock, spill, cover, switch. Better. I looked at my watch. It was midnight. I had been practicing for 3 hours. My back ached. My eyes burned. I thought about Vanessa. I thought about her choice. Florida. She chose a swimming pool over her father. That thought steadied my hands. I did it again. And again, and again. By 3 in the morning, the movement was fluid. It was no longer a trick. It was a reflex. I sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted. I looked at the trap document. Clause 14B stared back at me. It was just a paragraph of text, but it had the weight of a gavel. I realized then that this was the most important signature of my life. I wasn't just signing a paper. I was signing a Declaration of Independence. I hid the trap document inside the left sleeve of my cardigan. I would wear that cardigan tomorrow even though it was warm. Old people get cold easily, right, Gavin? I lay down, but sleep didn't come. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly. Tomorrow morning a stranger would come into my house, a notary public, an official witness. Gavin thought she was coming to witness my surrender. He thought she was coming to watch an old man sign away his life, his home, and his dignity. He was wrong. She was coming to witness an execution. I closed my eyes and visualized the moment, the pen touching the paper, the ink flowing, the trap snapping shut. I whispered into the darkness, "Come on, Gavin. Bring the notary. Bring the papers. Bring your arrogance. I am ready." The doorbell rang at exactly 9 o'clock. It was a cheerful sound, a two-tone chime that usually signaled the arrival of a package or a pizza. Today, it signaled the arrival of the executioner, or so Gavin thought. I was sitting at the dining room table wearing my favorite beige cardigan. It was too warm for the season, but I insisted on wearing it. I told Vanessa I was feeling a chill in my bones. The truth was that the left sleeve of that cardigan concealed the most dangerous weapon in the house, the forged power of attorney document with Clause 14B. Gavin opened the door. He was wearing his best suit, a navy blue number that cost more than my first car. He was smiling that predatory smile. "Welcome, Mrs. Gable," he said. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Mrs. Gable was a small woman with glasses on a chain and a stamp in her purse. She looked like a librarian who did not tolerate overdue books. She walked into the dining room and looked at me. "This is my father-in-law, Bernard Hayes," Gavin said, guiding her to the table. As I mentioned on the phone, he is having some cognitive difficulties, but he is having a good day today. We just want to get this sorted out to help him manage his affairs." Mrs. Gable nodded. She looked at me with professional sympathy. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said. "Do you know why I am here?" I looked at her. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I blinked slowly. "You are the lady with the stamp," I said, my voice raspy. "Gavin said I have to sign the paper so the bad men don't take my house." Gavin stiffened. He forced a laugh. "He means the creditors, Mrs. Gable. We are restructuring some debts for him." Mrs. Gable sat down. She opened her briefcase. "Very well. Let us proceed." Gavin placed a document on the table. It was the original, the one that gave him total control over my life with zero accountability. He smoothed it out with his manicured hands. He read it one last time. His eyes scanned the paragraphs, quickly checking for any errors. He was thorough. He was paranoid. "Everything looks in order," Gavin said. He uncapped a pen and placed it next to the paper. He looked at me. "Okay, Pop, just like we practiced. Sign right here next to the X." I stared at the paper. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. The moment I had rehearsed until 3 in the morning. I reached for the pen. My hand trembled violently. This was not acting. The adrenaline was making my nerves fire uncontrollably. I need water," I said. "My throat is dry." Vanessa was standing by the kitchen door. She jumped into action, playing the role of the dutiful daughter. "I will get it, Daddy," she said. She brought a tall glass of ice water. She set it down on the table right next to the document. "Careful," Gavin warned. "Don't spill it on the papers." I picked up the glass. The condensation made it slippery. I took a sip. My eyes met Gavin's over the rim of the glass. He was watching me with impatience. He wanted this over. He wanted his money. I lowered the glass. Then I launched the performance. I started to cough. It began as a small hack, then escalated into a violent fit. I heaved. I wheezed. My whole body shook. "Oh, God," Vanessa said, rushing forward. "Daddy, are you okay?" I flailed my arm. It was a calculated spasm. My hand struck the glass of water. It wasn't a splash. It was a tidal wave. The heavy glass tipped over, sending ice water flooding across the polished mahogany table. The water rushed toward the document like a predator. "No," Gavin shouted. He lunged for the paper, but he was too late. The water soaked the bottom half of the document, turning the ink into a blurry blue mess. The water kept pouring off the edge of the table and onto Mrs. Gable's skirt. Mrs. Gable shrieked, jumping up from her chair. "My dress," she cried, batting at the water. Chaos erupted. Vanessa grabbed a towel. Gavin screamed, his face turning red. Vanessa ran to the kitchen. Mrs. Gable was backing away, shaking her skirt. Gavin turned his back on me to grab the napkins from the sideboard. This was the window. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. I swept the soaked, ruined document off the table and into my lap. In the same motion, I let it slide down between my legs onto the floor under the chair. My left hand was already moving. I pulled the dry trap document from inside my cardigan sleeve. I slapped it onto the table in the exact same spot where the wet one had been. I grabbed a napkin from my pocket and frantically dabbed at the table around the document, pretending to clean up the mess. "I am sorry," I wailed. "I am sorry I made a mess. I am a clumsy old fool." Vanessa ran back with the roll of paper towels. She started wiping the table aggressively. Gavin turned back around. He was furious. A vein was throbbing in his forehead. "You idiot," he hissed under his breath. He looked at the table. He saw the document. It was sitting on a dry patch of wood surrounded by damp napkins. He didn't question it. Why would he? In his mind, there was only one document. The water must have missed it. Or maybe I had moved it just in time. His brain filled in the gaps because he was too focused on the disaster with the notary. He picked up the document and shook it. It was dry. "It is fine," he said, letting out a breath. "It missed the paper. Thank God." He looked at Mrs. Gable, who was dabbing her dress with a tissue. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Gable," Gavin said, his charm returning instantly. "We will pay for the dry cleaning, of course. Please, can we finish this quickly?" Bernard is obviously very agitated. Mrs. Gable sighed. She adjusted her glasses. She was annoyed. She wanted to leave. Fine, she said. Let us get this done. She sat back down. She did not look closely at the document. Why should she? She had seen him check it 2 minutes ago. Gavin placed the trap document back in front of me. Sign it, Pop, he said, his voice tight. Now, before you break something else. I looked down at the paper. It was identical to the one he had printed, except for that one tiny paragraph in the middle, Clause 14B. I gripped the pen. I let my hand hover. I signed. Bernard L. Hayes. The ink flowed smoothly. It was the signature of a man reclaiming his life. I sat back, exhaling a long, shaky breath. Done, Gavin said, snatching the paper away. He signed his name on the line marked Agent, Gavin Miller. I watched the pen tip carve his name into the paper. I watched him bind himself to my debts. I watched him accept liability for the fraud, the theft, and the mortgage. He was signing his own confession. And then the final nail in the coffin. Mrs. Gable took her stamp. She pressed it firmly onto the paper. Thump. The sound echoed in the quiet room like a gunshot. It was official. It was legal. It was irrevocable. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, Gavin said, standing up. Vanessa will see you out. Vanessa walked the notary to the door. Gavin stood there holding the document. He stared at it with a look of pure hunger. He ran his thumb over the seal. I did it, he whispered. He didn't know I could hear him. He didn't know I was watching him with the clarity of a hawk. He looked at me. The mask dropped completely. There was no pity in his eyes anymore, just triumph and disgust. You can go to your room now, Pop, he said. We have work to do. I stood up. I made sure to hold on to the table for support. I shuffled toward the hallway. When I reached the doorway, I stopped. I turned around. Gavin was already pulling out his phone, probably to call the loan shark, probably to tell him the money was coming. Thank you, son, I said. My voice was soft. Gavin looked up. He smirked. You are welcome, old man. I walked down the hall to my room. I closed the door. I locked it. I leaned against the wood and let the smile spread across my face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the baring of teeth. He had called me old man. He thought I was finished. He thought he had just inherited a fortune. Instead, he had just inherited a debt that would bury him. I sat on my bed and pulled the burner phone from my sock. I texted Ike. The fish has taken the bait. The hook is set. I could hear Gavin upstairs laughing. He was popping a bottle of champagne. I could hear the cork fly. Drink up, Gavin, I thought. Enjoy the bubbles. Because tomorrow the hangover is going to be fatal. I looked down at the wet spot on my trousers where the water had spilled. It was uncomfortable, but it was worth it. I had just pulled off the greatest magic trick of my life. I had turned a victim into a victor right under the nose of the villain. Now all I had to do was wait for the trap to spring. I lay back on the pillow, and for the first time in weeks, I slept. I slept the deep, restful sleep of a man who knows that justice is not just a concept. Justice is a hammer, and I had just handed it to the judge. The federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta smelled of floor wax and cheap coffee. It was a smell I knew well from my years in logistics dealing with customs disputes and union contracts. But today I was not here as a businessman. I was here as a defendant. Case number 4922, the United States versus Bernard Hayes. I sat at the defense table next to a public defender named Mr. Pinsky. He was a young man with a suit that was too big for him and a schedule that was too full. He had spent exactly 5 minutes with me before the hearing. He did not ask if I was innocent. He did not ask about the evidence. He just looked at the medical file Gavin had provided and sighed. Mr. Hayes, he had said, his eyes scanning the fake dementia diagnosis. We are going to plead nolo contendere due to diminished capacity. The prosecutor has agreed to a suspended sentence provided you are remanded to a state care facility. It is the best deal you are going to get. I had nodded, keeping my head down. I let him believe I was the confused old man described in those papers. Behind me in the gallery sat my executioners. Gavin was leaning forward, whispering to Vanessa. He looked impatient. He checked his gold watch every 30 seconds. He had a cash buyer waiting at the house at noon. He needed this hearing to be over so he could drive me straight to Shady Acres and collect his check. Vanessa was staring at the back of my head. I could feel her gaze. It burned. Was she feeling guilt? Was she remembering the times I carried her on my shoulders? Or was she just thinking about the swimming pool in Florida? "All rise," the bailiff shouted. The Honorable Judge Evelyn Moore walked in. She was a stern woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked like she had heard every lie in the book and had no patience for any of them. She sat down and adjusted her robes. "Call the case." The prosecutor stood up. He was a sharp-looking man who clearly thought this was a slam dunk. "Your Honor, the government is prepared to proceed with charges of wire fraud and theft of government funds against Mr. Hayes. However, given the defendant's advanced age and deteriorating mental condition, we have reached a plea agreement with the defense." Judge Moore looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mr. Pinsky, is this correct?" Pinsky stood up, smoothing his ill-fitting jacket. "Yes, Your Honor. My client is suffering from advanced cognitive decline. He is not competent to stand trial. We are entering a plea of not guilty by reason of mental defect and agreeing to immediate custodial care." Gavin leaned back in his seat. I could hear him exhale. He thought he had won. He thought the gavel was about to fall and seal my fate. Judge Moore looked at me. "Mr. Hayes, do you understand what your lawyer is saying? Do you understand that you are admitting to the crime but claiming you did not know what you were doing?" I looked at the judge. I looked at Gavin. He gave me a sharp nod, silently, commanding me to say yes. I opened my mouth to speak, but the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a loud boom. Every head turned. Walking down the center aisle was a man in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than Gavin's car. He carried a leather briefcase that had seen 1,000 battles. He walked with a limp, but he moved with the authority of a tank. It was Harrison, my estate lawyer, my friend. He did not look at Gavin. He did not look at Vanessa. He walked straight to the defense table and placed his briefcase down with a heavy thud. "Your Honor," Harrison's voice boomed, filling the high-ceilinged room. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is Samuel Harrison. I am retained counsel for Mr. Bernard Hayes." Silence swept through the room. Mr. Pinsky looked confused. I was appointed by the court," he stammered. "The family said Mr. Hayes was indigent and incompetent." Harrison smiled. It was a shark's smile. "The family was mistaken," Harrison said. "Mr. Hayes is neither indigent nor incompetent, and Mr. Pinsky, you are relieved." Gavin jumped up from his seat. "Objection!" he shouted. His face was flushing a deep, angry red. "This is ridiculous. My father-in-law is senile. He doesn't know what he is doing. He didn't hire this man. I have his medical records right here." "Sit down, sir," Judge Moore barked. "This is a courtroom, not a bar fight." Gavin sank back into his seat, but his hands were gripping the bench in front of him so hard his knuckles were white. He glared at Harrison. If looks could kill, Harrison would have dropped dead right there. Judge Moore turned to Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, you are entering these proceedings at the 11th hour. Do you have a notice of appearance?" "I do, Your Honor," Harrison said, handing a document to the clerk. "And more importantly, I have a statement from my client." Harrison turned to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Bernard," he said softly, "tell them." I stood up. I did not shake. I did not stutter. I stood tall, my spine straight, my chin up. I looked directly at Judge Moore. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and strong, "I did not defraud the government. I did not sign those loan applications. And I am certainly not senile." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The prosecutor frowned, looking at his file, then at me. This was not the drooling invalid he had been promised. Harrison stepped forward. "Your Honor, we enter a plea of not guilty. Furthermore, we are requesting an immediate continuance to present new evidence regarding the origin of the signatures on those loan documents. We have reason to believe Mr. Hayes is the victim of identity theft and elder abuse." Elder abuse. The words hung in the air like smoke. Gavin let out a strangled noise. Vanessa put her face in her hands. The prosecutor looked at Harrison. "You have evidence, counsel. We are compiling it as we speak," Harrison said. "We request that Mr. Hayes be released on his own recognizance pending the new hearing." Gavin stood up again. He couldn't help himself. He was watching his payday evaporate. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage, "I must protest. I have a durable power of attorney signed by Mr. Hayes just yesterday. It grants me full guardianship. He is a danger to himself. He cannot be released alone." Gavin reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the document. The trap document. He waved it in the air like a sword. I have the legal authority here, Gavin declared. He signed it. He knows he needs help. Harrison looked at the document in Gavin's hand. He looked at me. We shared a microscopic moment of triumph. Gavin had just admitted in open court that he possessed the document. He had just admitted that he was the agent in charge. Judge Moore sighed. She rubbed her temples. "Bring it here," she ordered. The bailiff took the document from Gavin and handed it to the judge. She scanned it. "It appears to be in order," she said. "It is notarized." She looked at Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, your client signed a power of attorney yesterday giving this man guardianship. That contradicts your claim that he is being abused." Harrison didn't flinch. "Mr. Hayes signed that document under duress, Your Honor. However, if Mr. Miller insists on enforcing his guardianship, we will not object to Mr. Hayes returning to his home today under Mr. Miller's care, provided that the court notes Mr. Miller's acceptance of all responsibilities outlined in that document." Gavin looked confused. He expected a fight. He expected Harrison to try and void the POA. Why was the lawyer agreeing to let me go back with him? Because Harrison knew the trap. He knew that the moment we stepped out of that courtroom, the police would be waiting at the house. He needed Gavin to feel secure. He needed Gavin to think he still held the leash. "Very well," Judge Moore said. "I am granting a continuance of 1 week. Mr. Hayes, you are released into the custody of your son-in-law, but I am warning you, Mr. Miller, if there is any evidence of mistreatment, I will hold you personally responsible." "I understand, Your Honor," Gavin said. He was smiling again. The arrogance was back. He thought he had outsmarted the high-priced lawyer. He thought he had won the battle. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. Harrison squeezed my shoulder. "Sit tight, Bernard," he whispered. "It is almost over." I watched Harrison walk away. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He had played his part perfectly. Gavin walked up to the defense table. He grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, painful. "Let's go, Pop," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "We have a schedule to keep." We walked out of the courtroom. Vanessa was waiting in the hall. She looked pale. "Is it over?" she asked. "Not yet," Gavin snapped. "But it will be." He dragged me toward the elevators. The courthouse was busy with lawyers and criminals, but I felt isolated in a bubble of danger. Gavin was vibrating with tension. The plan had hit a snag, but he was determined to force it through. We reached the parking garage. The air was thick and humid. Gavin pushed me toward his SUV. He opened the back door and shoved me inside. He didn't get in immediately. He leaned into the car, getting right in my face. His eyes were wild. The mask of the loving son-in-law was gone completely. "Who called him?" Gavin hissed. "Who called the lawyer?" I looked at him calmly. I didn't answer. "You think you are clever, don't you, old man?" Gavin whispered. "You think a continuance is going to save you." He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. "As soon as we get home, I am doubling your dose. You won't wake up for a week. And by the time you do, this house will be sold and you will be rotting in Shady Acres. Nobody will believe a junky old man." He released me, pushing my head back against the headrest. "You made a mistake trying to fight me, Bernard. You just made it painful." He slammed the door. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the concrete garage. I watched him walk around to the driver's side. He looked powerful. He looked in control. I looked out the window. Vanessa was in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, wiping tears from her face. They thought they were driving me to my doom. They thought they were taking me back to the prison they had built. I settled back into the leather seat. I smoothed my cardigan over the spot where the burner phone was hidden. Drive, Gavin, I thought. Drive fast. Because you are not driving me to a nursing home. You are driving yourself to a crime scene, and the police are already there waiting for the man who just admitted in federal court that he is responsible for everything. I closed my eyes and let a small, cold smile play on my lips. "Let's go home, son." One last time. The drive back from the courthouse was a blur of tension and silence. Gavin drove like a man escaping a bank robbery. He weaved through traffic, honking his horn, cursing at anyone who dared to slow him down. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her hands twisting a tissue into shreds. I sat in the back. I was the cargo, the package that had to be delivered before it expired. We pulled into the driveway and Gavin killed the engine. He turned around, his eyes wild. "Get him inside!" he barked at Vanessa. "Pack his bags. I don't care what the judge said. We are moving up the timeline." Vanessa looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. "But Gavin, the judge said we have to wait a week. If we move him now, and the lawyer finds out, we could go to jail." We are already going to jail if I don't get that money, Vanessa. Gavin screamed, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. Do you not understand the math? Viper wants his 350 grand by Friday. It is Tuesday. We are selling this house today. He jumped out of the car and dragged me out of the back seat. He didn't bother with the wheelchair act anymore. He shoved me toward the front door. Move, old man, he hissed. We walked into the house. It felt different. It didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a crime scene waiting for the yellow tape. Gavin threw his keys on the counter and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. He put it on speaker because his hands were shaking too much to hold it to his ear. Vance, it is Gavin. The deal is on. I stood by the kitchen island listening. Vance, that was the name. A voice crackled on the other end. Smooth, deep, professional. I thought you had a legal snag, Gavin. I heard something about a continuance. Gavin laughed. It was a high-pitched, manic sound. Just a formality, Vance. I have the power of attorney. It is ironclad. The old man is fully under my guardianship. I can sign the title over to you right now, but I need the cash transfer today. There was a pause on the line. I watched Gavin sweat. I watched a drop of perspiration roll down his temple and stain his expensive collar. Today, Vance said slowly, That is a rush order, Gavin. That is going to cost you. $380,000. Take it or leave it. Gavin flinched. That was $20,000 less than the asking price. That was $20,000 less for his getaway fund. Fine, he shouted. Fine. Just bring the check. When can you get here? I am around the corner, Vance said. I can be there in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Gavin hung up. He looked at Vanessa. Get the liquor, he ordered. We need to celebrate. He looked at me. And you sit down and shut up. One word out of you and I swear to God I will finish what the arsenic started. I walked to my armchair in the living room. I sat down. I crossed my legs. I placed my hands on the armrests. I looked like a statue of patience. Inside, I was smiling. Vance wasn't a real estate investor. Vance was an old friend of Ike. He was a retired undercover agent who used to bust money laundering rings in the 90s. He played the part of a shady businessman better than the real thing. The doorbell rang exactly 4 minutes later. Gavin smoothed his hair. He adjusted his tie. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, trying to put the mask of the successful businessman back on. He opened the door. Mr. Vance walked in. He was a large man wearing a tan suit and sunglasses which he did not remove. He carried a metal briefcase. He looked like money. Dirty money. Gavin reached out to shake his hand. Mr. Vance, thank you for coming so quickly. Welcome to the property. Vance ignored the hand. He walked past Gavin into the living room. He looked at the high ceilings. He looked at the hardwood floors. He looked at me. Who is this, Vance asked, pointing a gloved finger at me. That is my father-in-law, Gavin said quickly, stepping in front of me to block the view. He is the previous owner. He is just waiting for transport to his care facility. Don't mind him. He is completely out of it. Vance nodded. He looked around the room with a critical eye. Nice structure, Vance said. Good bones. I can flip this for $600 easy. Gavin winced. He hated hearing that he was losing money, but he had no choice. It is a great investment, Gavin said, his voice tight. Shall we sign the papers? I have the title ready. Vance walked to the dining room table, the same table where I had performed my magic trick with the water glass just 24 hours ago. Let's see the paperwork, Vance said. Gavin opened his briefcase. He pulled out the deed to my house, he pulled out the sales contract, and finally he pulled out the power of attorney. He laid them out on the table like a royal flush. Here is the deed, Gavin said, tapping the paper. Free and clear. No mortgage. And here is the power of attorney signed and notarized yesterday. It grants me full authority to liquidate all assets on behalf of Bernard Hayes. Vance picked up the power of attorney. He held it up to the light. He scrutinized the signature. He scrutinized the notary stamp. He looked at Gavin. You sure this is legit? Vance asked. I don't want any trouble with heirs coming out of the woodwork later. It is 100% legit, Gavin insisted. My wife is the only heir and she is right here. He gestured to Vanessa, who was standing in the kitchen doorway holding a bottle of scotch. She looked like a ghost. Vance looked at Vanessa. You okay with this, Mrs. Miller? Vance asked. You okay with selling your daddy's house while he is sitting right there? Vanessa looked at Gavin. Gavin glared at her, a silent threat burning in his eyes. Yes, she whispered. It is for the best. Vance shrugged, cold, calculated. All right then, let's do business. Vance opened his metal briefcase. Inside were stacks of cash, hundreds of thousands of dollars in banded bills. I brought cash, Vance said. I thought you might appreciate the liquidity. Gavin's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He had expected a cashier's check. But cash was better. Cash was freedom. He could take this money and disappear tonight. He could leave me in a ditch and Vanessa in a motel and vanish into the wind. I saw the greed consume him. It swallowed his caution whole. Where do I sign? Gavin asked, his voice trembling with lust. Vance pushed the sales contract toward him. Right there at the bottom. And I need you to sign an affidavit stating that you are acting as the legal agent for Mr. Hayes. Suburban. Gavin grabbed the pen. He didn't even read the sales contract. He just wanted to touch that money. He signed the contract. Scribble. Done. He pulled the affidavit toward him. He signed that too. And just to be safe, Vance said, his voice dropping an octave, I want you to initial the power of attorney document itself, right next to your signature, just to reconfirm that you accept the terms. Gavin laughed. He was high on the fumes of victory. I will initial whatever you want, he said. He grabbed the power of attorney. The trap document. The one with clause 14b. He put the pen to the paper. I sat up in my chair. Gavin, I said. My voice was not the rasp of a dying man. It was the boom of a supervisor on a loading dock. It cut through the room like a foghorn. Gavin froze. The pen hovered over the paper. He turned slowly to look at me. What did you say? He whispered. I stood up. I walked toward the dining room table. I did not shuffle. I walked with the steady gait of a man who owns the ground he walks on. I looked at Vance. Vance nodded slightly. I looked at Gavin. I said, stop. I repeated. Gavin's face went pale. He looked at Vanessa, then back at me. Sit down, Pop, he stammered, trying to regain control. You are having an episode. Vanessa, get his pills. I am not having an episode, Gavin, I said, stepping closer. I am having a moment of clarity, and in this moment I think you should read the fine print. What are you talking about? Gavin snapped. He looked at the cash, then at the gun bulge under Vance's jacket. He was starting to realize that the room had shifted. The paper you are holding, I said, pointing to the power of attorney. You were so eager to sign it yesterday. You were so eager to prove you were in charge. But you didn't read it, did you? You were too busy wiping up water and counting your chickens. Gavin looked down at the document. It is a standard form, he said. I read it. No, I said, you read the decoy. You read the one I let you read. But that is not the one you signed. I leaned over the table. I placed my finger on the middle of the page. Read it, Gavin. Read Clause 14, Section B. Read it out loud so everyone, including the police officers listening outside, can hear it. Gavin looked at the text. His eyes scanned down. He stopped. I saw his pupils dilate. I saw his breath catch in his throat. He read it in silence. His lips moved, forming the words, liability, assumption, debt. Read it, I commanded. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide with horror. You switched them, he whispered. Read it, I roared. Gavin's voice shook. It was a whisper of defeat. By exercising any power granted under this instrument, the agent, Gavin Miller, agrees to assume full personal liability for all existing debts. He stopped. He couldn't finish. He dropped the paper as if it were burning his fingers. He looked at the cash in the briefcase. Then he looked at Vance. Who are you? Gavin asked, backing away. Vance took off his sunglasses. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. I am not a buyer, Gavin Vance said. And that is not real money. Those are marked bills from the evidence locker. Gavin spun around to run to the back door, but the kitchen door opened. Ike walked in. He was wearing his badge on his belt. Behind him were two uniformed officers. Going somewhere, son? Ike asked. Gavin stumbled back. He bumped into the table. The briefcase of fake cash fell to the floor, spilling the bundles of paper. It was a setup, Gavin screamed. He pointed at me. He tricked me. He forged it. I picked up the power of attorney from the table. I didn't forge anything, Gavin, I said calmly. I just gave you a choice. You could have walked away. You could have treated me with dignity. But you wanted control. You wanted to be the boss. I held the paper up. Well, congratulations, Gavin. You are the boss. You are the boss of a $350,000 debt. You are the boss of a fraud investigation. And thanks to this signature right here, I pointed to the wet ink where he had just signed the sales contract. You just attempted to sell a property that you admitted legally belongs to a man you are defrauding. That is a felony. Gavin looked at Vanessa. Help me, he begged. Tell them he is crazy. Vanessa was sobbing quietly in the corner. She didn't look at him. She looked at me. I am sorry, Daddy, she whispered. I looked at my daughter, the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to chase away the monsters. Now she was the monster's accomplice. It is too late for sorry, Vanessa, I said. Gavin lunged. It was a desperate animal act. He grabbed a steak knife from the counter and lunged at me. I didn't move. Ike moved. He tackled Gavin before he could take 2 steps. They hit the floor hard. The knife skid across the hard wood. Get off me! Gavin screamed, thrashing like a fish on a hook. I am the guardian. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent. Ike grunted, pulling Gavin's arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of the lock breaking on my cage. I looked down at Gavin, his face pressed against the floor, exactly where he had watched me spill the water the day before. I walked over and stood above him. You wanted me to be a vegetable, Gavin, I said softly. I leaned down close to his ear. Well, you reaped what you sowed. Ike called him up. The officers grabbed Vanessa. Take them away, Ike said. I watched them go. I stood in the silence of my living room. The fake money was scattered on the floor. The power of attorney lay on the table. I was alone. But for the first time in months, I wasn't lonely. I was free. Vance closed his empty briefcase. Nice work, Bernie, he said. You should have been an actor. I looked at the empty doorway. I was an actor, Vance. For 7 days, I played the hardest role of my life. I walked to the window and watched the police cars flash their lights. But the show is over, I said, and the critics are going to be harsh. The room was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ragged breathing of a man watching his life disintegrate. Gavin stared at the document on the table as if it were a venomous snake coiled and ready to strike. The confidence that had defined him just moments ago, the swagger of a man who believed he was the smartest person in the room, had evaporated. In its place was a raw, primal fear. Read it, I said again, my voice steady and cold. Read Clause 14, Section B. Gavin looked up at me. His eyes were wide, darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a lawyer, looking for anyone to tell him this was just a nightmare. But there was no one. Just me. Just the father-in-law he had tried to erase. He looked back down at the paper. His hands were shaking so bad the paper rattled against the mahogany table. He licked his dry lips. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He swallowed hard and tried again. By exercising any power granted under this instrument, the agent herein referred to as Gavin Miller agrees to assume full personal liability for all existing debts, liens, and encumbrances associated with the principal's assets. He stopped. He choked on the words. Keep going, I commanded. I did not raise my voice. I did not have to. The authority of the truth was loud enough. He took a shuddering breath. Furthermore, the agent acknowledges that any prior financial transactions conducted on behalf of the principal were done at the agent's sole direction and benefit, and the agent accepts full legal responsibility for restitution of said funds. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hanging in the air waiting to drop. Gavin stared at the words. He read them again and again, hoping that if he stared hard enough they would change, hoping that the ink would rearrange itself back into the decoy document he thought he had signed. But the ink was permanent. The trap was sprung. Do you understand what you just signed, Gavin? I asked. I walked slowly around the table, closing the distance between us. He didn't answer. He was doing the math in his head. I could see the numbers spinning behind his eyes. Allow me to clarify for you, I said. By signing that document and having it notarized, you didn't just get the power to sell my house. You also accepted the debt. All of it. The $90,000 you stole from the government. The $400,000 you fraudulently borrowed against my equity, and the $350,000 you owe to your loan shark friends. I leaned in close. It is all yours now, Gavin. It is not my debt anymore. It is not the estate's debt. It is yours. Personally. You just signed a confession and a promissory note all in one. Gavin dropped the paper. He backed away from the table as if it were on fire. He shook his head violently. "No," he whispered. "No, this is not legal. You tricked me. You switched the papers. This is fraud." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Fraud?" I asked. "You want to talk about fraud? You spent weeks poisoning an old man to steal his home. You forged loan applications. You impersonated me at the bank, and now you want to cry about a magic trick." Gavin looked at Vanessa. She was standing by the window, her face pale, her hands covering her mouth. She had heard every word. She understood the implication. The Florida dream wasn't just dead. It was buried under a mountain of debt that would crush them for the rest of their lives. "Vanessa," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Do something. Call a lawyer. He can't do this. He is senile, remember? We have the doctor's report. We can say he didn't know what he was doing." Vanessa lowered her hands. She looked at her husband with a mixture of horror and realization. "But you signed it, Gavin," she whispered. "You signed it, and you initialed it." Gavin's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. He looked at the document lying on the table, the evidence of his stupidity, the anchor that was dragging him down. He lunged for it. He grabbed the paper with both hands and ripped it. The sound of tearing paper was loud and violent. He tore it in half, then in quarters. He crumpled the pieces into a ball and threw them on the floor. He stomped on them, grinding the paper into the hardwood with his heel. There he screamed, his chest heaving. "It is gone. There is no document. It never happened. It is your word against mine, old man. And who is going to believe a dementia patient over a successful businessman?" He looked at me with a wild, desperate triumph. He thought he had destroyed the chain. He thought he had broken the lock. But he forgot one thing. I was a logistics man. I never shipped a package without a tracking number and a backup copy. "You can tear up that paper, Gavin," I said calmly. "You can burn it. You can eat it if you want. It doesn't matter." Gavin froze. "Why doesn't it matter?" he demanded. "Because that was just your copy." A voice spoke from the kitchen doorway. It was a voice smooth as velvet and sharp as a razor. We turned to look. Harrison stepped out from the shadows of the kitchen. My lawyer. The man Gavin thought he had outsmarted in court just hours ago. He was holding a file folder and he looked immaculate in his charcoal suit. He walked into the living room with the casual air of a man who had already won the war before the first shot was fired. "Mr. Harrison." Gavin stammered. "What are you doing here? This is private property. Get out." Harrison ignored him. He walked over to the mess of torn paper on the floor and looked down at it with mild amusement. "Littering is a bad habit," Mr. Miller Harrison said. "Harrison. But destroying legal documents is a felony. Luckily for you, that particular document was already redundant." He opened his file folder. He pulled out a crisp, clean photocopy of the power of attorney, the one with Clause 14B, the one with Gavin's signature and the notary stamp. You see, Harrison continued holding the document up for inspection. "Mrs. Gable, the notary, is a very efficient woman, and she is also a client of mine. As soon as she left your house yesterday, she uploaded the digital scan of this document to the state registry and emailed a certified copy to my office." Gavin's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair to hold himself up. "It was filed with the clerk of courts exactly 2 hours ago," Harrison said, tapping the paper. "It is public record now, Mr. Miller. You accepted liability for the debts at 9:30 a.m. yesterday, which means when you tried to sell the house to Mr. Vance today, you were technically trying to sell an asset to pay off a personal debt that you had already acknowledged was yours." Harrison closed the folder with a snap. "In legal terms, Mr. Miller, you are cooked. You owe the federal government $90,000. You owe the mortgage lender $400,000. And from what I understand about your other creditors, you are in very deep water with some very dangerous people. And since you signed as the liable party, they won't be coming after Bernard's estate. They will be coming after you, your car, your personal bank accounts, your future wages." Harrison paused and looked at Vanessa. "And since Georgia is a marital property state, Mrs. Miller, I am afraid they will be coming after you too. Half of that debt is yours." Vanessa let out a strangled cry. She slid down the wall, collapsing onto the floor. "My life," she sobbed. "My whole life is over." Gavin looked at her. Then he looked at Harrison, and finally he looked at me. The reality hit him. The walls were not just closing in, they had already crushed him. He was not going to Florida. He was going to spend the rest of his life paying for his greed. Or worse, he was going to prison. His face changed. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, dead look. The look of a cornered rat that has decided to bite. "This is all your fault," he whispered, staring at me. He took a step toward me, his hands curled into fists. "You ruined everything," he said, his voice rising to a shout. "I gave you a place to live. I took care of you, and this is how you repay me. You set me up." I stood my ground. I did not flinch. "You tried to kill me, Gavin," I said. "You didn't give me a place to live. You gave me a waiting room for the morgue. I should have finished the job." He screamed. He snapped. The veneer of civilization cracked and fell away. He wasn't a businessman anymore. He was a murderer whose plan had failed. He roared a sound of pure frustration and hate and launched himself at me. He moved faster than I expected. He cleared the space between us in 2 strides. His hands were reaching for my throat. His eyes were wide and white, focused entirely on snuffing out the source of his ruin. "Gavin." "No," Vanessa screamed. Harrison shouted something, but I didn't hear it. All I saw was Gavin coming at me. All I saw were the hands that had mixed the poison, the hands that had forged my signature, the hands that wanted to squeeze the life out of me. I braced myself. I was old, but I wasn't helpless. I raised my cane, the hickory stick I had carried since my knee surgery. But I didn't need to use it, because justice was already in the room, and it was faster than both of us. The kitchen door, which had remained slightly ajar after Harrison entered, flew open with a crash. Ike was there, and he wasn't alone. But in that split second, before the cavalry arrived, before the handcuffs and the shouting, there was just me and Gavin. I looked into his eyes as he flew toward me, and I saw his soul. It was small, it was weak, and it was terrified. He didn't want to kill me because he hated me. He wanted to kill me because I was the mirror showing him exactly what he was, a failure. His fingers grazed my cardigan. That was as close as he got. The air in the room exploded with noise and motion. But for that one frozen moment of time, as the fine print of his destruction hung in the air, I felt a profound sense of pity. He had sold his soul for $400,000, and in the end, he didn't even get to keep the receipt. Payoff is a funny word. Usually it means getting money. But sometimes the best payoff isn't what you get. It is what you give. And I had just given Gavin Miller exactly what he deserved. The truth. And it was going to bury him. The chaos in the living room settled into a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and the click of metal ratchets. Ike stood up, brushing the dust off his knees. He hauled Gavin to his feet. My son-in-law, the man who wore $3,000 suits and sneered at waiters, now looked like a ragged scarecrow. His expensive jacket was torn at the shoulder. His hair was wild. His face was pressed against the hardwood floor, leaving a red mark on his cheek that looked like a brand of shame. I watched the officers secure his wrists. The handcuffs were silver and tight. They bit into the flesh. Gavin winced, but he did not scream. The fight had gone out of him. He was a bully, and like all bullies, he crumbled the moment the power shifted. He looked at me with dead eyes. There was no apology there, only the cold calculation of a man wondering how he was going to survive in a cell. But I was not looking at Gavin. I was looking at Vanessa. She was standing at the corner near the china cabinet where we kept the family heirlooms. She was shaking so violently that the glass doors of the cabinet rattled. Her face was a mask of pure terror. She looked from Gavin to the police, then to me. She was running the calculations just like her husband. But unlike him, she had a card left to play, or so she thought. She took a step toward me. Her knees gave way and she collapsed. It was not a feint. It was a performance. She fell to her knees, clasping her hands together in a pose of prayer. "Daddy," she wailed. Her voice was high and thin like a child's. "Daddy, please, you have to listen to me." I stood still. I leaned on my cane, feeling the solid wood under my hand. It was the only thing holding me up because inside my heart was breaking into a million jagged pieces. I didn't know Daddy. Vanessa sobbed. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her perfect makeup, leaving black streaks of mascara on her cheeks. I didn't know he was doing this. He forced me. He told me he would hurt me if I didn't go along with it. I was scared, Daddy. I was so scared. She crawled toward me on her hands and knees. It was a biblical scene, the prodigal daughter returning not with humility, but with a lie. He made me mix the coffee, she cried, reaching out to grab the hem of my trousers. He told me it was just medicine. He told me it would help you sleep. I didn't know it was poison. I swear on Mommy's grave I didn't know. I looked down at her. I looked at the hands reaching for me. The same hands that had held mine when she was a little girl crossing the street. The same hands that I had held when she was sick with the flu. The same hands that had poured arsenic into my mug every morning for 3 weeks. Ike stepped forward. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was the digital voice recorder I had planted under their bed. He pressed play. The sound was tinny but clear. It cut through Vanessa's sobbing like a knife. "So tell me, Vanessa, do you want to be homeless on the street with a senile old man? Or do you want to live in a mansion in Florida sipping cocktails by the pool? Choose. Right now." There was a pause on the recording, the silence of the bedroom amplified by the speaker. "Florida. I choose Florida." The recording ended. Vanessa froze. Her hands hovered inches from my leg. She looked up at me and the lie died in her throat. "You chose Florida," I said softly. "You didn't choose safety. You didn't choose survival. You chose a swimming pool." Vanessa scrambled backward. She shook her head frantically. "No, that is taken out of context." I was confused. "He was gaslighting me too, Daddy. You have to believe me. I am your daughter. I am your baby girl." I looked at Ike. He nodded. He walked over to the kitchen counter where Vanessa's purse was sitting. It was a large beige Gucci bag. The leather was soft and expensive. It probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Ike opened the bag. "You can't do that," Vanessa screamed, jumping up. "That is my private property. You need a warrant." "We have a warrant." Mrs. Miller Ike said, his voice calm and authoritative. "It covers the premises and all vehicles and personal effects belonging to the suspects. And we found something very interesting in your car earlier." Ike reached into the bag and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt, a simple thermal paper receipt from a garden supply store in downtown Atlanta. He handed it to me. I put on my glasses. My hands were steady now. The grief had turned into a cold, hard resolve. I read the receipt. Date: 3 weeks ago. Items: 3 bags of potting soil, 1 pair of heavy-duty gloves, and 1 packet of Ricinus communis seeds. Castor beans. I looked up at Vanessa. "Castor beans," I said. She went pale. All the blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax doll. "I don't know what that is," she whispered. "I wanted to plant a garden." "Don't lie to me, Vanessa," I roared. The sound of my own voice startled me. It was the voice of a father who had been pushed too far. "I know what castor beans are, and I know that you didn't plant a garden. There is no garden in the backyard. There is only grass." I took a step toward her. She backed away until she hit the wall. "You bought these to extract ricin, didn't you? Or maybe you just crushed them up to boost the arsenic. You researched it. You went to a specialty store in the city because you didn't want to use a credit card online. But you were careless. You kept the receipt. Maybe you needed to return the gloves. Or maybe you just wanted a souvenir of how clever you were." Vanessa started to shake her head, but no words came out. The evidence was physical. It was in my hand. It was undeniable. "You weren't forced." "Vanessa," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You were the architect. Gavin was the muscle. He was the greed. But you were the betrayal." I threw the receipt on the floor. It fluttered down, landing next to the fake money. Ike gestured to the 2 uniformed officers. "Cuff her." "No," Vanessa screamed. "No, please. Daddy, don't let them take me. I am sorry. I will make it up to you. We can start over." The officer grabbed her arm. She fought him. She scratched and kicked, losing all dignity. "Daddy, help me!" she shrieked. I turned my back. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The neighbors were gathering. Mrs. Higgins was there, standing on her porch with her hand over her mouth. The mailman had stopped his truck. A group of teenagers were filming with their phones. I heard the click of the handcuffs behind me. I heard Vanessa sobbing. It wasn't the cry of a child anymore. It was the cry of a criminal who had been caught. "Take them out," Ike said. I watched through the window as the procession began. First, Gavin came out. He walked with his head down, trying to hide his face from the cameras. The officer pushed him toward the back of the squad car. He looked small. The arrogance that had filled this house for weeks was gone, leaving only a hollow man in a torn suit. Then Vanessa. She was still crying loudly. She looked at the house. She looked at the window where I was standing. Our eyes met through the glass. I didn't look away. I didn't wave. I just stood there. I remembered the day she was born. I remembered holding her in the hospital thinking that I would die for this child. I thought that bond was unbreakable. I thought that blood was thicker than water. But blood is not thicker than poison. She saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't anger, it wasn't hate, it was indifference. She realized then that she had not just lost her freedom. She had lost her father. The bank of unconditional love had finally closed its account. The officer guided her into the car. She ducked her head and disappeared into the darkness of the back seat. I turned away from the window. The room was quiet again. Ike was standing by the door, holding his hat in his hands. "You okay, Bernie?" he asked. I looked around the living room. The furniture was the same. The pictures were the same. But the house was different. The ghosts were gone. The fear was gone. "I am okay, Ike," I said. I walked over to the dining room table. I picked up the glass of water that had started the whole chain reaction. The ice had melted. I poured it into the fern. The plant was dying, but maybe with fresh water and time it could grow back. Or maybe I would just buy a new plant. I looked at Ike. "Is it over?" I asked. "The legal part is just starting," Ike said. "There will be depositions, trials. The press is going to be all over this. The man who tricked the scammers. You are going to be a hero, Bernie." I shook my head. "I am not a hero, Ike. I am just a father who had to do the hardest thing a father can do." "What is that?" Ike asked. "I had to let them go," I said. I walked to the front door. Ike followed me. We stepped out onto the porch. The police cars were pulling away, lights flashing silently in the midday sun. I watched them turn the corner and vanish. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and exhaust fumes. It smelled of reality. I looked at my hands. They were old, they were wrinkled, but they were free. "I don't want to be a hero," I said. "I just want to be Bernard Hayes again." Ike put his arm around my shoulder. "You never stopped being him, brother." We stood there for a long time watching the empty street. The show was over. The actors had left the stage, and now I had to figure out what to do with the rest of the play. But one thing was certain. I was going to write the script myself, and there would be no more victims in my story, only survivors. "Let's go get some coffee," Ike said. "Real coffee." I smiled. "Sounds good," I said. "But let's go to the diner. I don't think I will be drinking anything in this house for a long time." We walked down the steps, leaving the front door open behind us. The house needed to breathe. It needed to exhale the poison. I was 69 years old. I had no wife. I had no daughter. I had no son. But as I walked down the driveway with my best friend, I realized I had something much more valuable. I had my life. And for the first time in years, it belonged entirely to me. 2 months is a long time to wait for silence. For 60 days, I lived in a hotel room while the lawyers and the forensic accountants dissected the corpse of my family life. They peeled back every layer of Gavin's financial ruin. They found the offshore betting accounts. They found the emails to the dark web suppliers where Vanessa bought the castor beans. They found the second mortgage he had forged 3 years ago on his own parents' house. The rot went deep. It was not just a stain on the surface. It was a cancer that had consumed them both. But today, the dissection ended. Today, the judge stitched it all up. I sat in the back row of the federal courtroom. I did not sit with the family because there was no family left. I sat next to Ike. He wore his best Sunday suit and polished shoes. He didn't say a word. He just sat there like a stone wall protecting me from the wind. Gavin stood before the bench. He had lost weight. His suit hung off him like a costume on a wire hanger. He didn't look back at me. He was too busy trembling. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was a small, frightened man facing the consequences of his own greed. Judge Moore did not mince words. She called his actions predatory. She called him a danger to society. She sentenced Gavin Miller to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. 15 years. I watched Gavin's knees buckle. The marshals had to hold him up. He wasn't crying. He was hyperventilating. He was realizing that he would be 50 years old when he saw the sky as a free man again. He would miss the prime of his life. He would miss the technology, the changes, the world moving on without him. He had traded 15 years of freedom for a few months of stolen luxury. It was a bad trade. Then it was Vanessa's turn. She looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She mouthed the words sorry one last time. I believe she was sorry, but I also believed that if Gavin's plan had worked, she would be sipping a margarita in Florida right now, not mourning me. Regret is not the same thing as innocence. 8 years, attempted manslaughter, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse. The gavel came down. It sounded like a door slamming shut, a heavy steel door that would not open for a very long time. I watched them lead her away. She walked with her head down. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just accepted the weight of her choices. Ike leaned over to me. "Let's go, Bernie," he whispered. "It is done." We walked out into the bright Atlanta sunshine. The air was crisp. It was autumn. The leaves were turning gold and red. The world was dying and being reborn at the same time. I had one last piece of business to attend to. I drove back to the house. The house on Elm Street. My house. It was empty now. I had hired a company to stage an estate sale. Everything was gone. The furniture where I had raised my daughter. The dining table where I had performed my magic trick. The bed where I had hidden the recorder. It was all sold to strangers. I walked through the empty rooms. The footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors. I thought I would feel sad. I thought I would feel the ghosts of memories tugging at my sleeve. But I felt nothing. It was just wood and drywall. It was just a structure. A home is made of love and trust. When those things are gone, the house is just a box. I walked into the kitchen. I stood where the fern used to be. The fern I had poisoned to save my own life. I took a check out of my pocket. It was a cashier's check for $90,000 made out to the Small Business Administration. I had repaid the debt, but I didn't use my pension. The forensic accountants had liquidated Gavin's assets. His Porsche, his boat, his collection of vintage watches, even Vanessa's designer handbags. All of it was sold at auction. I used his vanity to pay for his crime. It felt like poetic justice. I placed the keys on the kitchen counter. The new owners were a young couple with a baby on the way. I hoped they would fill this place with better memories than I had left behind. I walked out the front door and locked it for the last time. I didn't look back. There is no point in looking at a tombstone when you are still alive. Ike was waiting for me in the driveway, but he wasn't in his car. He was standing next to a beast. It was a 30-foot Winnebago, a recreational vehicle. It was white with blue stripes and it gleamed in the sunlight. It had a queen bed, a kitchenette, and a satellite dish. It was a house on wheels. "You sure about this?" Bernie Ike asked, kicking the tire. "It is a lot of vehicle to handle." I smiled. "I managed a logistics hub for 30 years, Ike. I think I can handle a bus." I climbed into the driver's seat. It smelled of new leather and possibility. It didn't smell of arsenic. It didn't smell of betrayal. I put the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, a deep, powerful rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. But something was missing. The passenger seat was empty. I opened the door and whistled. "Here, boy." A ball of fur scrambled up the steps. He was a mix. Part German Shepherd, part something else, part trouble. One ear stood up and the other flopped down. He had scars on his snout from a hard life on the streets before the shelter found him. I named him Justice. He jumped into the passenger seat and looked at me with brown eyes full of absolute, unconditional loyalty. He didn't care about my money. He didn't care about my house. He just wanted to be with me. He wanted to go where I was going. That is what family is supposed to be. Ike reached up and shook my hand through the open window. "Where are you headed first?" Ike asked. I looked at the map on the dashboard. It was blank. No routes, no schedules, no deadlines. "West," I said. "Maybe the Grand Canyon? Maybe the Pacific Ocean? I have never seen the ocean from the other side." Ike smiled. "Keep your phone on, Bernie. I want pictures." "I will," I said. I released the parking brake. I shifted into gear. The RV rolled forward. It was heavy, but it moved with grace. I turned onto the main road, leaving the gated community behind. I watched the neighborhood disappear in the side mirror. The manicured lawns, the secrets hidden behind closed doors, the golden cages. I was 70 years old. Most people my age were settling down. Most people were shrinking their worlds. I was expanding mine. I thought about Vanessa sitting in her cell. She chose Florida, but she got a cage. I chose the truth, and I got the whole world. I looked at Justice. He barked happily, tail thumping against the seat. "We are going to be okay, boy," I told him, and I meant it. I had learned a hard lesson, a lesson that cost me my heart and almost cost me my life. I used to think that family was blood. I used to think that you stick by your kin no matter what. That is a dangerous lie. Blood is just biology. It is just DNA. It doesn't guarantee love, it doesn't guarantee respect, and it certainly doesn't guarantee safety. Family are the people who show up when you are in trouble. Family are the people who tell you the truth even when it hurts. Family are the people who would never let you drink from a poisoned cup. Ike was my family. Harrison was my family. This dog with the floppy ear was my family. And me. I was my own family. I had learned to love myself enough to fight back. I had learned that I was worth more than a signature on a check. I merged onto the highway. The road stretched out before me, a gray ribbon leading into the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. It was not an ending. It was a new dawn. I turned on the radio. Some old blues song was playing. I hummed along. My name is Bernard Hayes. I am a survivor. I am a traveler. And for the first time in a long time, I am exactly where I belong. In the driver's seat. They looked at my gray hair and saw a victim. They forgot that wrinkles are just maps of where a man has been and what he has survived. I learned that the hardest part of betrayal is not the knife in your back, but recognizing the hand that holds it. But I also learned that it is never too late to rewrite your ending. You do not owe your life to anyone who treats you like a burden, even if they share your last name. Dignity is not given. It is earned, and sometimes you have to fight the people you love to keep it. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Vanessa if she begged on her knees, or is some trust impossible to repair? I read every comment from the road. Stay safe and watch your coffee.